All right, good morning. We're going to call this morning's Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Vice Chair Sonier.
Present.
Alderman Browning.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. Alderman Cone. I'm sorry, Chair Clerk Hubbard.
Here.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Aldridge. We have 4 present. We have a quorum.
All right, with that, I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes from Tuesday, October 29th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
It was moved by Vice Chair Sanye and seconded by Alderman Browning that we accept the minutes from Tuesday, October 29th, 2024. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sonier.
Aye.
Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. Chair Clerk Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Cone, we approve the minutes. We approve the minutes. We have 5 present. We have 5 present. The minutes have been approved.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. We are going to move this agenda around respectfully. Today, we are going to move up our Comptroller, Comptroller Darlene Green, for her presentation to go first.
Morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning. And can we,
Committee members. And I'm just here to give a brief update of the overall ARPA contracts that are coming through the Comptroller's office. I understand there was some concern, and I did send you guys email this morning with that report, and I hope you got it. And where we stand, we received 210 contracts that are ARPA contracts since July 1st. And currently in the federal grants section, we have 42 contracts that we are currently processing. I read 6 of them should have been signed yesterday by Jason, who's my deputy comptroller. 21 are pending information that we still need to get from the departments throughout the city. And then we have 15 that are actively being worked on. As you know, a federal grants contracts takes a while to process through our office, approximately 2 to 3 weeks it takes. And so we are very hopeful that as we continue to get the, I'm going to call it an avalanche of contracts that are ARPA-funded grant contracts, that we're able to process those. We're doing a very good job now. I want to just applaud my staff. We've had some staff shakeup, as you may have heard, where those who had been pretty fatigued did decide to take other positions throughout the city, different departments, and we have been able to move swiftly to move other people into those positions to keep the processing of these ARPA contracts going. And that's pretty much the update I have. We know that we have tomorrow an E&A meeting. There will be other contracts that will be approved and coming through. I do know that there's going to be an ordinance to update the ARPA. I would ask that you guys would join my office to just let all the administration know. That includes all of us electeds and heads of departments that we are right at the door of the deadline to get these things processed through. So any help that you could be would be appreciated. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you. That was going to be actually one of my main questions, is what we can do to help support you. So I do just want to thank you for taking the time to be here. When I talked about it Friday, I was excited because I always wanted to make sure you have the opportunity to share the facts, right, and get them captured so that we can then share them with our constituents. You know, I'm a little partial because I'm your audit lady, so I like to brag. I'm the comptroller's audit lady, but I know about the business. I understand the business, and I understand it's important to make sure that our community understands it so they're not manipulated and misled with false narratives. So the fact that you gave us a timeline for a while, being 2 to 3 weeks on the average to get something done, that's good for us to know, to be able to share. If people have specific questions, I'm sure they can reach out to your office or through us as well. And I'm going to now open it up to see if our colleagues have any questions, starting with Alderman Cone.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Madam Comptroller, for coming and providing the update.
All right, Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Comptroller, for being here and answering questions. Thank you to Mr. Fletcher for doing so much work for the city. I really appreciate it. So I just have a few questions. I did receive your email. Thank you for sending it. So since July 1st, 210 contracts received. Are those all ARPA contracts?
Correct.
Okay. And then it says currently in federal grants, 42 contracts. So those are the ARPA contracts that you are still in processing.
Correct.
Of the 210.
Okay. 6 that you signed yesterday, 21 pending information from departments, and 15 actively being worked on. And what does that mean, actively being worked on?
So those are being processed.
Can you talk in the microphone? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Jason Fletcher. I'm the Deputy Comptroller. So those are contracts that are currently being processed by our department. What that looks like is first reviewing the contracts, making sure everything is there, and if everything's there, set up projects in our accounting system. Those projects are then identified by tasks, and then we assign encumbrances and then approve the purchase order so that money can be spent.
Okay. Do you have any idea of how many more that your office is expecting? Or is this almost all of the contracts for ARPA?
Well, there's $86 million roughly still remaining to be obligated as of today. I looked today before this meeting. So roughly $86 million has not made it to the comptroller's office for review, processing, and signature by the comptroller.
And you're expecting those because you have a 2-week turnaround at latest beginning of December?
Yeah, we're expecting those. What we've been told, working with the other departments, is that they are in contract form. So they're with department heads around the city. They just haven't been processed through their departments to get them to.
Okay, and
And
that's part of what we'll be discussing today is every one of those dollars, having every I dotted and T crossed that needs to happen, which takes obviously many different departments and leaders in the city touching the issue.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming through and answering questions, and I really appreciate it. It's always good to know about the full work product, so thank you so much.
All right, next we'll go to Alderman Browning.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Aldridge. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you, Madam Comptroller, for being here, and Deputy Jason. No questions. Glad we both got the memo for the green today.
Vice Chair Sanya.
I don't have any questions. I think your explanation of everything and where it are is really clear. So I really just want to say how much I appreciate this information. I think it's really good to make this available to the public because I think a lot of residents are not aware of the processes of paperwork, and obviously everyone knows our deadline is coming up. So I'm glad to see that there is active communication between us, and whatever I can do to help. If there is anything more specific that you all need from us to get done, I know we have some legislation we're discussing, so obviously we got to get that legislation done. I look forward to doing that, but whatever means of support, and even if it's just Comptroller, you have a message you want to get out, I'm happy to talk about that at neighborhood meetings in different spaces as I move through the community. And I do appreciate just this information, and hopefully some of this, I know they're updating the ARPA portal to show where these things are in the process. And I think all of that is that the mayor's office is updating that. And I think just all of us being transparent about where things are and taking every chance we can to educate the public is helpful. And I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, and I do want to leave you with this. We did report today on the ARPA, but I want you to also know that the regular grants are still being processed and have to be processed as well. And since July 1, we've had 200 of the regular grants to be processed as well. Now, the ARPA contracts are the priority, but that just shows you that the work has doubled since July 1 in my office in terms of processing grants. Contracts. I just wanted to make that note, and I wanted to say thank you to each of you. If you could just keep the word out there to have the departments, those folks that you know, to just say, hey, did your ARPA contract go to the comptroller yet? It's still on your desk. That would be so helpful, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Comptroller. So I had a few, just for clarity again for people watching. When you say regular grants, what would you
We
be?
have grants in the Health and Human Services departments. We have grants in the Public Safety departments that are just regular grants that we receive every year, and we want to make sure that we can also continue to process those as well. Those have to be processed in a timely manner, just like the ARPA grants have to be processed. And of course, we're putting a priority on the ARPA grants because we are up against a deadline, but we don't want to miss any deadlines that we have for the regular grants that help deliver city services throughout the city from the Health Department and from the Human Services Department.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I took a note from Mr. Fletcher. You said that you identified 86 million that was obligated. We're going to go over that later on in this meeting as we hear from the departments. I'm going to tell you why, because we know that in the community, obligated, encumbered, these words get tossed around and it confuses people. But just for clarity, again, in preparation for when we do hear from the departments later, where did you find the 86 million and how did you say it was unobligated?
So the 86 million I pulled from a shared report that the mayor's office staff and we share that details out the purchase orders that have been placed against the contracts. That's what's considered obligated when we have a signed contract and the funds have been obligated. And that report as of today showed about $86 million left to be obligated.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fletcher. Does anybody have any follow-up questions? Okay, Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned, Madam Comptroller, work has doubled. So do you feel that you got, the enough staff or need temporary staff to maybe help some of these contracts get through since the ARPA has brought a heavy load within the Comptroller office outside of the regular operations and duties that you already have?
It's a good question. We have considered that, and we have contracts that was approved through the ENA meeting, which was it last week or will it be this week? This week, we did an RFP in anticipation of needing outside help, and so we'll be approving a pool of firms that we can contract with at any given notice to come in and help us to process. So we put an RFP out, it was about a month ago or 2 months ago, and in anticipation of this point here where we would have this avalanche coming in. And so at the ENA meeting tomorrow, we will approve those, and then once they are approved, then we can pick up the phone and call any of those approved firms, accounting firms, consulting firms, whatever we believe that we need in order to get the job done.
Will it take any from those RFP or from those contractors, since they don't probably know the how your office operate? Will it take some time to onboard them with the process of getting some of these contracts out?
Well, because we're contracting with the accounting firms, we know that they would be able to give us those persons who have grant experience, grant processing experience, and that kind of knowledge, because that's what we're going to need.
Okay, well, again, thank you so much, Madam Comptroller, for being here and for all your work, Mr. Fletcher, and the additional staff that's here. And just know that you do have our continued support here, how we can help in moving this forward, helping to move it forward for you. And I also want to mention for someone that might be watching and might not know, ENA is the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. That is our Mayor, Mayor Jones, our Comptroller, Comptroller Darlene Green, and our President of Board of Aldermen, Megan Green, President Green. And that meeting is tomorrow, and you can watch those the same way you might be watching this today on STL TV. Thank you all so much for being here.
Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move back around in the agenda to item number 1. It's Board Bill 125. Alderwoman Schweitzer, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. This bill, Board Bill 125, has been a work in progress between last session and this session. In the previous session, I introduced a bill that brought this idea forward. Right after that happened, we had conversations with stakeholders, with the building division, the health department, within the administration, within the Community Housing Coalition President's Office, with the realtors and other folks who represent landlords, as well as people who are experts in this field of both mold testing and remediation, to make sure that we really understood what this bill needed to say to make sure that it was both enforceable and something that would be possible for people who would be remediating this in their own properties to handle and address in a collaborative manner. So you'll note that this bill is a lot more thorough than the previous bill. And while I know we have a lot on the agenda today, I want to go through it just briefly with you. At the very beginning, the whereas clauses talk about the health concerns that are presented with mold. I know at the very beginning of all of this, it comes back to the fact that we all have constituents who reach out to us saying that they have mold where they're living. And when we try to help them and get an inspector out, if they can't find a currently in code reason why mold might be present, it is very hard, and actually it doesn't really happen at all, and that's what this bill is aiming to address, that is listed as a violation and the owners are made to remediate the problem if it's just kind of visual mold. So this bill is attempting to address that. So that's really what the whereas clauses lay out. In the definitions, one of the things that was flagged for us in the previous bill is that the definition of molds needed to be a lot clearer for both the inspectors and for people who are owning property and will need to remediate. So making sure that that was clear, defining more remediation efforts as well, and what that means in the bill. Then it goes into the responsibilities in the bill. So it talks about the owner's responsibility to prevent and remediate mold and what they need to do. And then there's a new section as well about the tenant's responsibility. If there's mold present within a refrigerator or on a stove or in a shower, the tenant is responsible for cleaning those areas, even while the owner responsible for helping prevent the growth. And if there is mold present in areas that are outside of those areas and not possible to clean by a tenant, that is part of what's in the bill as well. There's section 4, which goes over the health department's responsibility to create and maintain information about mold. After I've gone through the bill with you, the health department, Justin Hauser, is here to speak on that piece and what they've already done to help. Then the certificate of inspection on mold, which is the building division's role to go out and inspect mold. We've worked with the building division on this bill with Ed Ware very closely to craft this bill. It is my understanding that he is supportive of this bill, especially as we allowed a 6-month time frame in the bill for the building division to be ready to enforce it. Section 6 goes over the notices that are provided. We worked to make sure that the notices and remediation practices were very, very clear within the bill to make it as easy as possible for the department to follow and implement. It talks about the owner's responsibility to notify residents of the presence of mold in Section 7. Section 8 goes over mold remediation and what needs to happen within the mold and the building division's role in checking with owners. Section 9 goes through the reporting and prohibition of retaliatory acts, so how a tenant would be able to report this information. Right now, there is on the Citizen Service Bureau a way for people to report interior code violations so that once this bill is in effect, they would be able to report an interior code violation of having mold, and that would be a cause for an inspector to go out. There is a section 10 regarding enforcement, and section 11 goes over implementation. Attached to the bill, we had included some information within what we've been working with the health department on for providing information and materials that already exist. So trying to, again, lessen the workload on the departments to create materials when these things are already available. Goes over the penalties for violation in section 12, section 13, effective date. You'll notice we do have an emergency clause, so we have it so that it really is 190 days once this bill is passed and signed, as opposed to it's signed, then 30 days, then 190 days. So that's why both of those sections are in there. And then a severability clause in case any of these sections are deemed void if the court finds that. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I'd love, if possible, for Mr. Hauser with the department to come up and address the committee. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and how wonderful you've been to work with. And now it's your turn.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Justin Hauser. I work for the City Department of Health, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity, for these remarks. I'd like to express our appreciation and support for these legislative efforts to address indoor air quality and the contributing factors, specifically mold, with this bill. And also our appreciation for the sponsor for incorporating the Department of Health early in this discussion. From a health equity standpoint, addressing indoor air quality and mold as an asthma contributing factor is a priority. The 2018 Equity Indicator Baseline Report ranked child asthma with the lowest possible score for equity. Currently, there is not an ordinance for our inspectors to directly address mold, and we focus more on contributing factors, such as moisture from defective plumbing or needed exterior repairs, such as tuck pointing. And while eliminating these sources of moisture are important, this board bill provides us another tool to help improve the air quality for tenants. We are excited to continue our strong collaboration with the Building Division by providing educational materials and guidance that is both aligned with EPA and other health jurisdictions in the region, along with aligning with best practices from cities across the nation to help address mold and improve indoor air quality for St. Louis City residents. Thank you for this time.
Thank you so much. I'm going to see if colleagues have any questions for the Health Department prior to us opening up for public comment. Alderman Cone.
Thank you. This is probably a question for both the sponsor and the Health Department. For the sponsor, do you envision this being enforced by the Building Division or by the Health Department or both?
Thank you so much. This is something that the enforcement would be in the Building Division.
I would really like to have the Building Division here to be able to answer questions around how they're going to operationalize this. And part of my concern around this is we passed back in, I believe, April of this year, the safe temperatures and rental bill. And as soon as we passed that and it went into effect, I started getting emails from constituents and rental units that were at unsafe temperatures, per the ordinance, and the Building Division was completely unaware that we had even passed an ordinance to that effect. And so they were probably aware of the board bill, they weren't aware of the ordinance, and the feedback that I got from the manager in the Building Division was that we should have included it in the building code section, but the way the ordinance was written, it was not included in the building code section, so they weren't looking at that. I'm very concerned about the expectations that we're setting with folks and how these things are going to really be enforced. I think I've mentioned, every time we've had one of these bills, the Building Division is woefully and inadequately staffed. And I'm concerned that we aren't going to be able to enforce these the way they're intended to be enforced, and would like to hear directly from the Building Division with respect to how they're intending to do that. I agree that this is a health concern. I agree that it's something that we should be, certainly trying to work on, but we need to make sure that we're able to actually live up to the expectations, not just the spirit of these bills.
Thank you, Alderman, and I really appreciate those comments. What you've just said was a lot of why I didn't forward on the previous version of the mold bill, because I did receive those flags from the building division that they had concerns about the previous version, how it was written, what it said, and their ability to enforce it. We've worked very closely with Ed Ware on this bill, met with him numerous times to talk about it, met with Nancy Cross. We've talked regularly about that, and that is why the 190 days clause is part of it. So that was something that they asked for a little bit more time. There are some pieces that we tried to make as easy as possible in here in terms of the materials that they would be providing, and the health department has worked really closely to make sure that we're setting them up for success from day one of when this goes into effect. I invited Mr. Ware to be here today, and I know he's a very busy person, so I understand that he's, obviously he's not here. He is aware of this hearing. He would have been testifying in support today, but I do understand that desire to hear directly from him. I'm happy to try to get a statement to you by the end of the day. If it's important to your vote, I can try to get it by the end of this hearing. But I also understand that, I don't know that I can promise something at this exact moment from him.
I don't need a statement saying that he supports it.
Okay.
I have questions answered from him
Okay.
with respect to.
Is it
the
a
department.
possibility for you to provide
And
those questions?
But we have, several representatives from the mayor's office and other city departments. Is no one available to get the head of the building department here or one of his designees? I mean, this is something that was pretty common practice, over the years, that we had city department heads here to testify with respect and to answer questions.
I appreciate that, sir.
And I understand that you made him aware of it, but these things we wouldn't have known had it not been for a question and answer with the previous head of the building division, that the building division is even doing inspections on a regular basis in any of our neighborhoods. They only do inspections when there's a complaint or when there's a permit pulled. And even then, I think most people would contend that they are not doing inspections consistently or properly throughout our city.
I appreciate that, Alderman. And one of the reasons that I kept working on this bill, after I didn't push it in the last session, is because I've had constituents reach out and ask, say that they have mold in their unit, and when they've reached out or filed a request in Citizen Service Bureau for an interior inspection, the inspectors have gone out, but they've gone out and said, we don't have a ordinance, we don't have anything in place to cite for mold. So they went out, they maybe saw the mold, what they thought was mold. If at that time, in person there at the unit, they would have been able to, as with any other inspection they do on an on-call basis, filed that violation. So, I think your point is well taken in terms of sort of the larger issue, but I would say that in my case, when I have advocated for tenants, the building division has gone out and inspected, but without this ordinance in place, they haven't been able to cite for mold. And so that is what we're trying to fix here.
Okay, I'm kind of trying to look through people here, but I see Grace, I see Casey. Are either of you available or prepared to testify on this, or do you have the ability to get someone from the building division here for this hearing?
Thank you, Casey.
Casey Milberg from the mayor's office. So I don't keep Commissioner Ware's schedule. My understanding is Department of Health was requested to come today. What I can commit to is contacting him and seeing if he can come over, but I can't commit to getting him here. Right now, I can also ask him if he can send someone in his stead.
Someone from the building division that would be able to answer questions would be very much appreciated.
Well, like I said, I don't keep his schedule, so what I'm happy to do is reach out to
I
him,
understand that you
if
don't
he
keep his schedule, but you
someone else
work in
can-
the office of
to
the
represent the
mayor.
building division today.
You work in the office of the mayor. He works for the mayor. You all have some ability to influence whether or not people show up at these hearings. So I would appreciate you all trying to get either him or one of his representatives here to answer questions with respect to the bill.
With pleasure.
Okay.
And what specific questions, again, do you want a representative from the building division?
How they're going to enforce the bill,
Sure.
how they're going to operationalize it, questions along those lines in terms of whether or not they're actually going to have the capacity to be able to deal with the
Did he say he wasn't able?
All right. All right, Alderman Brown.
reserve my time, Madam Chair, while they're figuring that out.
Alderman Browning.
Thank you. Just want to thank the sponsor for her work on this bill. I know that it's just been something that's been lacking from our code and does make it difficult to enforce. Mold is a serious health hazard, especially to people with other conditions. But in general, it's a terrible thing that affects too many people, and it's kind of surprising that this wasn't already in our code. So thank you for identifying it. And then, on the subject of enforcement, I just think that sometimes we set laws in the city that, while there may be capacity issues in our city right now, we hope they're not always capacity issues, and we are working on those capacity issues. So why not have the tools for them to use when there is that capacity? Obviously, I'd love to be able to snap my fingers and hire 100 building inspectors, but as we work towards that goal, the ones we do have will be able to use this ordinance in order to make communities healthier. So very, very happy to see this, and I would like to add myself as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members of the committee, thank you for bringing this bill for Alderwoman. Can you talk about, I guess, the process of, as this bill is moving, the conversations that you and the building division had? I think we're trying to get a rep here, but maybe to give some insight on not being able to speak directly from Edward, but like what was the commitment that the building division made to this legislation to partner with the health department?
Thank you, Alderman Aldridge, for that question. So after I introduced the previous bill and the building division said, this is not going to be enforceable for us. The way the bill had been written didn't work for them. That's why I didn't push to pass it last session, because it wasn't ready. So this session, I would say I owe a huge amount of thanks to Cecilia Boyers within the president's office, who worked tirelessly to filter through all of the different feedback that we've gotten on the bill. And of course, the building divisions has been, front and center in terms of making sure whatever it is that is put in place, they are able to enforce. So we've met with Mr. Ware at least, I believe, 3 times in the last several months with different versions of the bill and addressing different pieces of concern that he had, some of which was the definition of mold, which we've made sure to really clarify within this, and how the inspector would be able to, what information they're pulling from. And that's where the health department and our research from other areas that do this work and enforcement, as well as provide information to the property owners when there is mold present. Those are all the different pieces that Mr. Ware had asked for, or Commissioner Ware rather had asked for, and that's what we made sure was in the bill.
Gotcha. I do also want to echo, I think, something that the alderman from the 9th said as far as capacity. We know that the city has a large vacancy when it comes to every department, and I think all departments are working hard each day. Got to give a shout out to the health department and to Dr. Mahdi, who serves as the commissioner of the health department, working diligently to ensure that the work from that department is being done throughout the city. Hopefully we will get to a place where we have more staff, but I think making sure that we have policies in place. I do get the understanding and the concerns also from the alderman of the 3rd, just not passing something to make sure it's not enforced. But it sounds like, I know I've talked with Cecilia from the president's office about the legislation. It sounds like you guys have been working on this for a while, been bringing all the stakeholders to the table. I know you're not one to just file anything and just move forward. You're very practical on making sure I's and T's are crossed, and maybe sometime a little too practical when we're talking about legislation. But I appreciate your work on it, and I also want to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Alderman.
Vice Chair Sanye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have questions, but I do just, want to start by uplifting something that, in the city of St. Louis, our asthma rate for our children is double what it is national, that the national standard is about 9.6%, but in our city, 20% of our children have, asthma. And from my time on the Board of Education, I got to learn, like, a lot of that does have to do with our housing quality standards, whether that's mode, whether it is lead, a lot of the ways that inequity shows up in our public infrastructure systems leads to those disparities. So I do just want to thank you for bringing this conversation forward, and for bringing a solution before us and trying to address it. And do want to uplift that I've had about 4 instances myself as alderwoman where I ran into the difficulty of was unable to get building inspectors to enforce mode. It wasn't even on the list of inspection. Like, I reached out, I said, hey, this is an interior violation. I think one constituent, I even put the CSB report in for them, but then I was told by the building inspector, like, this is not in our code, we don't have a means to enforce this. So I think that's really important. While staffing and capacity things are a part of the conversation, I think that right now, if we're finding out that that's an issue and we have the means to do something, it would have been helpful for me in those situations. Because I think if I could have gotten the building to cite it, gotten a fine to give it, I could have reached out to the property owners and probably gotten them to address it. But because we didn't even have it within our code, I really was unable to help those constituents, and 3 of them did not have the financial means to move, so they're still in a unit right now with mode. So I wanted to talk a little bit more. In the bill, it talks about directing the Department of Health to create materials with information about mold prevention, mitigation, and hazards. Could someone speak to what that would look like, how that part of it is envisioned to go?
I'll just intro it real quick, but we did end up finding a lot of this information already available from St. Louis County's Department of Health, the EPA. So again, trying to make it as easy as possible for the health department. But that wasn't good enough for our health department. When I talked to them about it, they said, we have some things we want to make sure is in here too, and here's what we're willing to do and commit time. So Justin can speak about the extra work that they've done kind of above and beyond.
Alderwoman Saunier, the Health Department currently provides educational information. Because we are limited right now, there's not an ordinance to expect compliance from. So when our inspectors visit residents, we're only able to provide verbal advice, and at that time, we give them a mold information sheet. The documents that would be prepared for this board bill would be an enhanced version of that, and there would be 2 points. It would be mold as a hazard and then cleanup for mold. So those would be the 2 main topics that the educational that we provide would cover.
To your knowledge, does the Department of Health have a public education budget line item, or do you guys get funding to do public education on these different matters?
We have a communications team. We do outreach, but I'm not in a position to provide additional information on the scope of that.
Okay. And then my next question was, just the penalties section and the vision of how we envision this to play out so that folks at home can know how this is envisioned to go. Is it the hope that if this is passed, someone will be able to file a CSB report as like an interior violation, and then that will trigger the process? Is that what we envision? And then if they are found guilty, there's up to a $500 fee at the discretion of the building division?
Yeah, so that is exactly right. They'd be able to file through CSB an interior code violation. And then the bill lays out the timeline that the owner would have to remediate. Well, it lays out what would be provided to the owner at that time, the timeline for being able to remediate it.
Say what that is. What's the timeline?
It's in section, let's pull it up exactly. Let me find the section real quick.
Is it the 7th?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Thank you. So it starts in section 6 because it talks about, well, section 5 really. So it talks about the building division, they would not issue a certificate of inspection to an owner if mold is found. And then it says the owner is responsible for remediation. And then the next section goes over the notice. This notice shall specify the mold must be remediated within 30 days of the date of the notice. It informs the owner of the notification obligations. It says that if it's not remediated, they may revoke the certificate of inspection for such unit, condemn it for occupancy, and order the rental dwelling unit vacated. It also goes over, the materials that are provided by the department. And then it talks about, if the owner's trying to fix it and that the building division can grant extensions, which is really important because sometimes it takes a while, to get somebody in, or, we wanted to make sure the bill was, again, the goal is mold-free units, not to not have people have housing, so making sure that that's, people can work together. And then talks a little bit more about what the rights are of the code official are to condemn if it's not followed. And then Section 7 talks about what the owner has to do, which is part of the whole process. And then the remediation is in Section 8.
Thank you. And then my last question is really about the creation of the certificate of mode. Could you just elaborate on that portion?
That's just when there's any inspection certificate would have what happened during the inspection and what the remediation needs to happen.
So they get a certificate if they get an infection and fail or pass?
It's just the notification process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I would say that's really it for my line of questioning. I did just want to use the opportunity while having the mic is just to uplift that I think right now, I feel like when a lot of these things have come forward, we run into the same issues with the enforcement, and a lot of it has to do with our manpower. And so I just want to use this opportunity to say on the record, I think this is why it's really important with funds that our city has, that we do invest in our city's workforce, that we do figure out a way to use the money that we have and that we will have to allocate and give to some, that we give it to city staff, because obviously we need city staff to enforce these policies and to be able to do what they want. And so I just want to make sure that I'm uplifting, I do understand the very valid and real frustrations of sometimes department's ability to enforce, but it seems to always come back to workforce. And so I think as city leaders, we definitely have a responsibility to really think intentionally about how we could use funds that the city has to support our workers and to address our workforce challenges in a long-term and sustainable way.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Oh, also, may I be added as co-sponsor? Thank you.
So noted.
All right. I see Alderman Cone moving his mic. Did you have some additional questions before we go to public comment? We're just going to go to
I
public.
also have some.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, and then we'll go.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I did get an email from Ed this morning, a little bit before the committee, that I missed, and that's on me, that he had a doctor's appointment, which is why he's not here today.
Thank you. Alderman Cone?
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Alderman. Hope that we can at least find one of his designees that can be here to answer some of these questions. Part of my, and let me be clear, I think it's a good bill. I think that this is something that we need to do. It's very frustrating when we get to places where we end up passing these things and then we get the emails from constituents who are begging and pleading for help, and we're not able to help them, or the departments don't know that these things have passed, or they haven't, started to plan accordingly, or they don't have the staffing and ability to do it. So I want to be very clear in terms of, where I'm at with that. But also, when it comes to items like mold, there are other code issues that are generally happening before mold comes into place. And so when you're talking about mold is more than likely because of a leaky roof. That's a code violation. That's a code violation that the building division is not currently citing, probably, because otherwise they probably would have gotten a notice from the city, that you're missing a roof. There are literally situations throughout our city where there are people who have tarps on their roof for months and months. And, whether that's a landlord, a homeowner, et cetera, those are situations that are very real and prevalent in our communities, and that causes mold. So tuck pointing, another code violation. Tuck pointing causes moisture to get in between what many of us love, our brick homes, and that brick then becomes moist. The moisture absorbs into the plaster walls. The plaster walls then start to bubble. They become moldy underneath and will oftentimes start to reflect mold, not weeks, not months, but sometimes years after that moisture has permeated into the brick because of the lack of tuck pointing. I can guarantee you that there are not enough code violations being made for tuck pointing in this city, especially Since we don't have a building division that goes out and proactively inspects properties across the city, the only time that they do that, I'm going to repeat this over and over, the only time that they do that is when there's a permit pulled, meaning that it's either an occupancy permit or someone's doing a rehab on a property, or that someone complains about it. And oftentimes in our communities, our neighbors aren't calling the city on neighbors over code violations. So that's almost never going to happen unless it's a nuisance property or other type of property. Leaky pipes, that's another code violation. Damp basements. Damp basements are generally due to poor ventilation, which is another cause with HVAC work that is improper or not up to date. But, we mentioned this during the debate over the, air conditioning. Window units are probably the more likely, accommodation that would be made. So those require people to change filters. Any HVAC system, whether it's a window unit or a central HVAC unit, requires people to change filters. Those are generally needing to be done, every month to every 6 months in order to maintain the proper amount of airflow so that mold doesn't generate within the system itself, whether that's a window unit. Window units are actually probably more frequent. Sometimes they need to be done weekly, depending upon where you are. So part of my line of questioning is, why aren't we enforcing those code compliance issues that would then prevent the mold from getting into these apartments in the first place? If we're, actually doing the preventative code enforcement that we should be doing as a city, mold would be less of an issue and less of an impact on our kids, on the people renting these apartments, et cetera. And so when we're not even doing the basics, I get concerned about how are we going to enforce these types of things. We have a long history, just in my short time down here, of adding things to the list that the building division should be doing, and then they don't do it. So, we talk about asthma and how awful it is. Well, one of the steps that this Board of Aldermen took many years ago to reduce asthma rates in the city was to require demolition of buildings to be watered down so that demolition dust doesn't get into the air. When you have communities, particularly in Southeast City and North St. Louis, that have a lot of demolition, and if you look at a map of the city, just in the last few years, there's whole blocks that have experienced demolition on some level. That demolition dust is filled with particulates that would cause asthma. And it also contains lead in many cases because of lead paint that was in those buildings previously. So we passed an ordinance saying that anyone who's doing demolition work in the city of St. Louis is supposed to be watering down the site so that that dust doesn't end up in our air that we breathe. We still get complaints. And the city is actually one of the worst offenders. The vendors and contractors that we use to demolish buildings that the city is paying for the demolition for aren't doing what we have specifically specified in our code that they need to be doing. So, and then safety, we required the building division to, basically require any developers that are doing construction in our city to make sure that there's accessibility on sidewalks and streets. Other cities do this everywhere. It's codified, it's an ordinance, and we still have entities, not to call them out because I've done this on occasion already, but BJC, regularly in WashU Medical Center, regularly cut off access to sidewalks in the Central West End, one of the more pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods in the city. Lead remediation, I've brought this up before in the past as well. The building division, we increased the fees for the building division about 12 years ago, and that increase in the fee was specifically supposed to go towards lead remediation. Lead remediation, the removal of lead from properties. We had testimony during that exchange where the building division specifically said that they are not doing that the money that they're collecting goes to pay for inspectors. So the inspectors are identifying that there's lead in those properties, but they're not removing the lead in the properties, which was required underneath the ordinance that required or increased the rate that people were paying for those occupancy fees. So I'm saying all of that to say, we've got the pre-existing codes that are on the books that would help prevent mold in these units. And then we've got code, ordinances that are on the books now that we're not even enforcing. That's why I think it's important to have the building division here to have these discussions, because it's really on them to do that enforcement. And I am so grateful to you that you reached out to them and you're having these conversations. But when I sit here and, we went through the budget process not too long ago, we're going to start another budget process here in a minute. The building commissioner at the time came before us and said, well, we don't need any more money, or at least this is, how it's been described to me, that we're adequately staffed. We all know that that is not true. And yet we just let it slide. I voted against the budget. That's one of the reasons why. So I get a little frustrated, when we have these conversations. I'm so excited about things like this because it's a really good policy, good idea, but I need to have that conversation with the building commissioner so that we can hold them accountable when we have these conversations in the future. When I got the emails about the, AC unit, I have a mid-rise apartment tower in my ward. No HVAC system, centralized at least. And the apartments in that building this past summer got up to 97 degrees. And when the tenants in that apartment were emailing me and calling me saying, why aren't they doing something? And I'm following up with the building commissioner and their staff, and they're saying, AC is not a code violation. And then I, as an alderperson, have to be like, well, what about ordinance, X, Y, and Z that we just passed in April? And then, start a whole chain of events. But, it's very, it becomes very frustrating in that respect, and why we need to have the people who are accountable and responsible for implementing these policies here to answer those questions. Because we need to be able to ensure that there's going to be some accountability on the back end, in my estimation. I don't know if anyone from the mayor's office happens to have an update, but I know the chair was talking about having the public testimony as well.
Yep, we can move
But we're working
forward
through
with that. Thank you again for your comments, Alderman Cone. No, we can wait. We can give it time because I did want to hear from the public, and I don't know if Alderman Schweitzer had any comments after that, or you want to just go straight to public comment?
Whatever you'd like, I'm happy to hear from the public.
Okay, I would like to be added as a co-sponsor as well. Okay.
Madam Clerk, you can add me as a co-sponsor.
Okay, so everyone in the room that has signed up to speak on Board Bill 125, can you raise your right hand? And you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? All right, we'll move forward with the list. The clerk, Madam Clerk will call your name. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, and we also have 2 people online as well.
Our participants online, can you turn your cameras on and raise your right hand? Well, we'll move to them when they come. We can start with the people that are in the room. Oh, okay. All right. There's 2 of them, Ms. Tara.
4. Trying to get them over.
I do this to try to keep the flow going so that we don't have to stop and swear everybody in one by one. Okay, thank you, ladies. Do you both swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? All right, we'll alternate them through online and in person, and we'll go in the direction of Madam Clerk.
Our first speaker is Troy Lee. In support.
Hello, greetings. Thank you for this. I believe an alleged conspiracy, collusion, and cronyism is in play with this old issue. When I stayed at an apartment for 29 months, I complained many times about the problem in the apartment with mold and other thing, but the management managed to take me to court for not paying rent. And see, this is part of the thing with tenants staying there who's afraid to come out and speak on it because of the management can come up with a phony accusation and not knowing the process of the court, how to file your evidence to fight them. People are constantly getting evicted. At Forest Park, the mold was so bad, it was growing mushrooms in there. I developed a listing, the problem in the place, and they took me to court again, and not having the knowledge of the court procedure. I know it now, but I was evicted. Even though I paid my rent every month for 29 months, I was evicted, and they sold the building. So my problem is after they sold the building, what happened to the major violations of mold or anything else? What happened to the inspector who certified the place for habitation that's really not habitable? And too many people are in fear of losing the place, or those who are stuck there because they have nowhere to go, they have no money to go, but they, are stuck in this isolation in the system of not being able to address the issue directly. Like I said, the mold, the mice, the roaches, no heat. This is a constant thing that's going on, that even though you have all these here, like I said, code violations, and you send out major violations to the people, and they do it within that 30-day period. Sometimes they evict the people within that 30-day period. So then when the inspectors do come back to re-inspect the place, well, the tenant is gone because they're evicted. And now the inspector kind of like sweeps it away because now there's nobody there to complain about the space. So I'm in support of this, and I hope that at the same time they put more pressure on the building inspectors and make them enforce the building inspector to go back and check whether the tenants are there or not, to make sure that the violations are being carried out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Drayton Brown in opposition.
Hello, Board. I'm coming up here to ask, is this bill in regards to HUD housing, or is this in general to everyone? Asking because the actualities of which we are, requesting information as far as mold is concerned. I was wondering if we're looking to hire, because I did see that inspectors, or hear that inspectors are therein not seeing that there is mold, or there is something that's allowing, for some reason, inspectors to allow individuals to stay there, and then later on in the inspection, they're getting in trouble for this. So is this that we don't have inspectors in our HUD housing, or is this for private residences? Mold is easily, removed by, tuck pointing, which is digging around the perimeter of the place and putting cement where it's worn away. Sometimes there's insulation that needs to be removed. So there's something known in most houses called drywall. And there's usually nowadays a pink foam. If you know anything about like drying your clothes in the laundry, when you dry it, there's a filter that gets your lint. In a house over years, there's basically lint in your wall to keep your heat and your air in, so that can get wet and your drywall can get wet. That's a simple process where you're just taking out the wall, taking out the insulation, and putting new walls in. So that shouldn't be, impossible. Yes, you can have, an air conditioner dropping water or something like that. And understanding that in the coding, people aren't necessarily understanding why, in fact, this is happening. I do understand most people don't do construction, but I was wondering, is this in regards to the housing of urban development where the city is mandated to take care of things like project housing or disability housing. Of course, I have seen on the news, there was an issue in the Peabodys with the removal of roaches in the Peabodys, and of course, we just simple alcohol, and cannabis is called hops, and alcohol and beer. And in beer, there is marijuana and alcohol. So we spray that, put them to sleep, and then some people do know how to remove those, even if they're not aware. So we're not hurting those animals. We are moving those animals out, and we do know that it's just drinking and smoking, the same thing we show that people can do when we don't put them in trouble. We just move them somewhere else so they're not bothering the population. So I'm here at the board wondering, are we stating that all private owners are now at fault for something, or are we stating that we're looking for somebody to come in and inspect places like the Peabodys or disability housing? I'm just unaware of those things, and I did see that there's apparently in our housing and urban development meeting a project that's allowing $86 million to go towards building something apparently like the Peabodys. We've had 210 contracts from people, be it an independent architect with conjunction with private construction companies.
That's your time.
Thanks.
Thank you, and we'll be sure to have those questions answered for you.
Ms. Tara Roku online, could you please turn your camera and mic on, please?
Hi, how are
You
you?
have-
My
you
name
have 10
is,
minutes.
should I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, my name is Tara Roque. I am the Assistant Director of the Interdisciplinary Environmental Clinic at WashU, and we represent Tenants Transforming Greater St. Louis and Metropolitan Congregations United. We drafted the 2019 report, Environmental Racism in St. Louis, that identified mold as a major environmental justice issue in this city. St. Louis is one of the worst cities in the country for mold. It's the 6th worst major city in the United States for patients showing sensitization for mold. We have a significant amount of mold in the air due to our location at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. So we have a lot of outdoor air quality issues with regard to mold. When people have mold in their home as well, they have no area of respite. Their lungs are always being damaged, always at issue. Their asthma is always flaring up. People end up in the ER, they miss work, they miss school. And as many of you mentioned, it's associated with poorly maintained housing, whether it's improperly sealed exterior elements, leaking plumbing. Both of those issues are covered by the housing code, the building code, the property maintenance code. But mold is not. And once mold growth begins, fixing those underlying issues will not get rid of the mold. The mold will continue to grow unless it's remediated. Mold remediation, unfortunately, is very expensive. The cost can go into the thousands. When you're talking about homeowners have a choice. They can choose to deal with the issue and be sick, or they can choose to spend the money. Tenants do not have that choice. Landlords without a code violation often will not voluntarily fix the problem. Tenants usually are not able to do it themselves. The lease itself will prevent them from making the kind of changes required to do mold remediation. Plus, it is a lot to expect a tenant to spend thousands of dollars to make capital improvements to a property they do not own. Tenants are not in the financial space often to make these changes. The majority of city residents live in rental housing, and over a fifth of the city lives in poverty right now. Without ordinances on the books, mold remediation is out of reach for many St. Louisans, and tenants have no legal resource. So we really do need this ordinance on the books. To Alder Cohn's point about the building department, I agree. I would love to see a lot more funding, a lot more manpower for the building department. We do need to do a lot of inspection. We do need to do a lot more enforcement action. Vacant properties are getting worse. They're falling down. Tenant occupied properties are having issues. They're not protected, but that's a different issue. But I do agree. I wanted to mention that. And I want to appreciate you all for drafting the bill. so that it includes the health department. Mold is more than
Excuse me,
just a
that's your
base.
time.
Sorry, thank you.
I would like you to finish that last statement, please.
Oh, okay. So I was just going to say that the health department, we need more than just code violations. We need health education. We need health literacy. People know how to identify that this leaking pipe, it's not just a leaky pipe, it can cause mold, so that they can stop the problem before they fix it, so they can identify the source of their health issues. So health literacy, the health department's inclusion is a wonderful part of this bill. So thank you.
Thank you.
Joanne Milo Gibson. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning or afternoon, Madam Chairman and other committee members. My name is Joanne Milo Gibson, and I am here to speak on behalf of Bill 125, which I very much feel we need. My daughter lived in an apartment that had mold, and it always affected her son because he had asthma. So I had advised my daughter to wash the walls with mold and mildew remover, then wipe them down with bleach, and then to leave her windows cracked when her and the children were out of the home so that it would dry up. And that worked somewhat. It was not 100%, but it helped. And also, as an employee of SLPS, now retired, we had many students who missed school or came to school with itchy, watery eyes, runny noses, breathing problems, coughing and wheezing because they're living in homes where there is mold. My job was to make sure that these children were at school every day, but they cannot be at school every day if they're sick. So, mold can cause serious illnesses and breathing problems, especially if a person already has underlying illnesses. So I am here. I know it's a big problem, and there's a lot of issues included in this. Like they said, we need more workers to inspect and do all this stuff, but somewhere there's got to be a balance where it can be fixed so that we won't have so many sick people. I thank you for hearing me, and I thank you for letting me be here.
I have Rachel Hurtado online.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, thanks. My name is Rachel Hurtado. I live in Ward 7. I'm testifying in support of Board Bill 125. I support what, the most impacted tenants and residents in St. Louis City have shared today about their experience with mold and the related health issues that come along with that. I appreciate that the bill outlines at the top those health conditions specifically for children in St. Louis City, that 1 in 5 children in our city struggle with asthma, and that's a lifelong condition that is exacerbated by the presence of mold in the home. I believe that everyone on this committee is aware of the myriad health issues that impact so many of the residents in St. Louis City. Who live in rental units, so I won't harp on that, but I will say that I really appreciate the concerns that Alderman Cohn is raising, and I don't think that those reasons are reasons to not pass policy right now. I encourage the members of this committee, these alders, and at the full board to remember and keep in mind why of course, funding our building division is important to the enforcement of these policies. But yeah, really gratitude to Alderwoman Schweitzer for including the enforcement mechanism, because that is something that historically has not been included in this type of tenant protection legislation, where the policy is passed and then we're like, yay, but there's no real way to enforce it. So the fact that this does include an enforcement mechanism that'll be available to the building division is really important, and it makes it a really good piece of legislation. So we need to remember that when budget season comes around this year. and ensure that we are increasing the capacity and infrastructure of our building divisions and city departments to be able to enforce this legislation on the ground and, make sure that tenants, especially low income and Black families, people who are marginalized in our city, people who live in slumlord housing, which definitely exists all over St. Louis, have this law to be able to protect them and protect them from these health conditions that come from mold. So, I support this legislation. I think that it needs to be passed now, today, and that we shouldn't wait for city departments to get their stuff together, because if we wait for that to happen first, we're never going to pass this important legislation. So, yeah, thank you.
Chice Taylor. Cal James Verde.
I've been told as a child that when Black folks start pulling out their pedigree, it's so you know they know what they're talking about. So if y'all excuse me, I'm going to pull out my pedigree. And I'm going to be brief because there's so many people. You know, I love Shane, but he get a little long-winded. Y'all bear with me, I'm 61 years old. Menopause, you understand. And so that you can be heard, you must speak. So I'm knocking at the door. I'm asking. You know I love you. But the longer I stay in inadequate housing, the sicker I get. I've been telling you for years I'm coming to your neighborhood. I'm 61 years old now, and you're welcome. I can't find a place to go. Even with a housing voucher, I can't find no place to go. My asthma is arrested. It's fine. But these are my credentials. I'm 33 years clean and sober and just got certified or working on getting certified to be a peer support specialist. Trust me, in your neighborhood, you need somebody working in mental health. But I can't find no place to go. This is the other note. You know, I am a graduate of Annie's Project, beginner farmer rancher, want to put an urban farm in her ward. But I can't find no place to go. Why can't I find a place to go? Because most of the places I could afford as a starting over senior ain't gonna pay me enough money to buy a building from LRA that's full of all this stuff we talking about. But let me pull out some more of my pedigree. I am formally a board member of the Asthma Consortium, which was created to address the issues around St. Louis having its own personal asthma corridor. And see, I felt that was important because as an African American, the asthma corridor was all of the zip codes on the north side, or what we used to politely call the black side. Well, guess what? I live in South St. Louis, and I'm here to tell all you Southsideans, it's just bad. It's just as bad. Whatever it was in that Team 4 plan, they planned for the north side, guess what? Farmers, you know. My credentials also say that I am the proud parent of 2 African American women who were raised in this town in some of the worst housing the city has ever provided, and some of it market rate, and not all of it on the north side, so that in case anybody's living in denial, no, this ain't a black thing, this ain't a poverty thing, this is what are we as constituent and leader going to do together to get this done. Now, if the building division needs to be empowered, pass the legislation. Please, push not only pass, but push past, I love her, she can see me outside, I love the mayor. If that's the stumbling block, all of us who want this know how to handle that on election day. But having said that, for now, this is what I came to the table to do. Because this too are my credentials, and you all will know that this is a restraining order. And I'm gonna be fast because I'm almost finished. I was one of the first parents living in the city of St. Louis to have the honor of having someone who was less than 2 years old diagnosed with asthma. We were living in, first, the Jeff Vanderloos.
Ms. Verdi, that's your time.
I'm coming close. Then into College Hill and into other places. Then she moved as an adult into the Hill Val. And it was known that the Hill Val was a place where mold and mildew and feces and methane, and that's what my grandchildren were born in. Now, my baby, I love her to death, but sometimes she don't make wise decisions, and I think some of that was because all of her life she lived in places where power did not care. And so now I am the parent of someone I got to have one of these for. Because in a moment when she wasn't thinking well, she thought she'd take my life. Y'all have a good day.
Kristen Blackman. In support.
Definitely in support. Good afternoon, board. My name is Christian Blackman. I am a resident in the 6th Ward, and I'm also Executive Director of Tenants Transforming Greater St. Louis. We are a Black-led, renter-led tenant organization. So let me get into it. So many tenants contact us all the time with mold being a huge issue. Had many tenants share their stories about how mold is in their home, how mold has impacted their health. We even had one sister that came, we were tabling an event, and she came. Oftentimes people be like, we didn't even know there was an organization that even did work around housing or that support tenants. That shared a story about her mother had gotten extremely ill from mold being in her home and eventually passed. So we get a lot of stories. You're gonna hear that a lot, I'm sure, about, we know at this point that mold impacts a lot of folks in the city of St. Louis. So a couple things. So we came, our organization, specifically our founding, one of our founding members, Sonny Hutton, came and gave a presentation to this committee, which the Home is Where Our Health Is brief, that's speaking to housing quality and how it impacts health. And in that brief, we talked about a lot of different pieces, and I wanted to name that and lift that up again because Alder Combs, you spoke to a lot of things that we talked about in that report. We talked about what are the problems, right? And that really came specifically first talking about the code enforcement process. And the code enforcement process needs to be better for occupied spaces. And so while I agree around, yes, some of these code enforcement issues could be fixed and it would not allow mold to happen. We could fix a roof, you could fix the leak. Mold more than likely is still gonna be in the residence. It is. So oftentimes it's not getting remediated. Everything is getting painted over, or however a property owner wants to act as if there's not mold present. Mold is something that's gonna last much longer than a roof that's leaking or a pipe that's leaking. So just wanted to lift that up really quickly. And lastly, because I'm trying to really not go over my 3 minutes. I want to get back to the brief because I feel like it's important, because in that brief, we collaborated with a lot of different organizations. 2 of those entities being both the health department and the buildings division. So both the health department and buildings division, who we clearly, we actually still meet with everyone that worked with us on that brief a year ago. We still meet with them. One of the solutions that we talked about is some of those bills have already passed, with safe temperatures and rental being one. But one thing that was a consensus was everyone was talking about mold. It was talking about mold being a huge issue, and we did. We talked about how will this get implemented? How do we make sure that inspectors, that there is enough capacity for inspectors to be able to fix this issue? And I hear that about capacity, but honestly, if we were gonna fixate on capacity, I'm sure a lot of bills probably wouldn't get passed, honestly. Let's just be real. So I hear that, and that is something that we lifted up and discussed as well, is why we don't wanna just pass something. We wanna make sure that not that it's just implemented, but it's actually enforced, and it's something that our people are gonna actually be positively impacted around. But as many have said, I don't think there should be any reason why this bill doesn't move forward. And lastly, again, our organization specifically gave a lot of input around this bill. Tara already testified. Thank you to her and the rest of her team, because they helped draft that mold memo.
That's your time.
Okay. All right. She helped draft that mold bill, and I want to say that we were one that gave a lot of input up to make sure that a lot of these pieces matter, specifically for tenants. So making sure that tenants actually have a voice in this and actually will be positively impacted, because at this point, we've already talked about how it impacts health. And last piece, while we're talking about this is going to be under buildings, we also have talked about while this is also a health issue, pretty much everybody that's going to come up here and talk about mold, they're going to speak to how it impacts health. And so I do think at some point we need to even think more about how the health department is also assisting the buildings division and making sure that tenants are feeling the impact of how this bill is actually, how mold is actually getting homes. Thank you.
Damon Starks, in support.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Damon Starks. I live in the 11th Ward. I also work with Action St. Louis and We the Tenants campaign. I would like to first say thank you, Ann Schweitzer, for introducing this bill. I've worked with, me and you done work this year together on this subject. I am in support of this bill. First off, in my campaign, we have members whose ceilings has fell in because of a leak, and mold ate through the walls, so the ceiling got weaker, it collapsed. The problem with mold is once it's present, once you can see it, it's already too late. You have to be able to remove mold. So the proper channel to remove, you got to clear out the drywall or plaster or whatever have you. You got to get that taken care of, because once it's visible to see, it is already too late. Another myth, we got to also realize that mold, to remove it properly as well and to treat it properly, it's a common myth to put bleach on it. Certain species of mold feeds off bleach, so it turns a couple of spots to the actual fuzzy stuff. So sometimes even bleach is a harmful chemical, more harmful to treat mold than anything. So here's my thing. In order to treat this properly and deal with this properly, this bill is very vital to the city of St. Louis, that we have this. This bill will provide those, not even just tenants, homeowners and everything else like that, ability to have better health. And like so many people have said, mold is detrimental to your health at the end of the day. So we got to stop looking at people as cash cows and stuff like that and start looking at people as people. So I'm here supporting Board Bill 125. Thank you.
Sarah Watkins, in support.
Hello, committee and everyone else. My name is Sarah Watkins. I'm the lead field organizer with Tenants Transforming Greater St. Louis. I also live in the 7th Ward. Just want to echo what my colleague Christian said about the enforcement piece, and that a lot of tenants are dealing with other issues other than mold. And so I wanted to share a story from a tenant that we've been working with, and I think it covers a lot of what we talked about today. Upon moving in, I lived in bad conditions along with my 7-month-old. I was very vocal of the fixing of damages and issues in my apartment, including black mold. Eventually, I stopped paying my rent as my home became unlivable. I've asked for solutions. The home itself is affected my mental health, and eventually I had to check myself in the Department of Mental Health because of this issue. I was told I could be moved into a new unit. Instead, I was evicted. I wanted to go to court, but I was told I couldn't. The amount of items that have been damaged equal up to a great amount. Due to property maintenance never coming to fix my problems, I had to take matters into my own hand and use my own personal items to clean water damage and mold. Majority of my daughter's clothes as well were destroyed. I went through a mattress, a TV that was infested with roaches and water. My daughter was also bit by a spider that was in her tent. Her high school diploma was damaged along with her school laptop and many more other items. And she goes on to list, she lost 8 pairs of baby shoes, 10 shirts, 7 pairs of jeans, 15 towels, 3 comforters, 2 sheets, 5 rugs, 1 couch, 1 TV, 1 mattress, 1 laptop, 4 toys, 1 baby tent, a baby crib, and she also lost $200 worth of food. So I think that this story demonstrates the need for the building division to do their job. And I also think that I want to say that I think we're in a period of transition and transformation in St. Louis. There's a lot of tenant protections that have come up in front of this committee, in front of the Board of Aldermen, and we all need to work together to make sure that they're enforceable and that it works for. Thank you.
Chris Wilcox, in support.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Wilcox. I live in the 14th Ward. I want to urge the board to support and pass Board Bill 125. You know, as the 56% of the population of St. Louis knows, who are tenants, landlords have precious few obligations under current law. It's more than reasonable to require remediation of a common hazard such as mold that damages human health. Tenants are prohibited, as the council said before, from remedying these structural issues themselves. If the landlord wants to retain those rights, they should be obligated to guarantee a livable home in return. Myself, I've had family and friends who have been forced to tolerate mold in their home. They've lived through multiple attempts to try to get the landlord to remediate it, and would even move out of the home only for it to be put back on the market with the mold still on it to put on for a new tenant. So the mold is far more present than we can even realize right now. You know, and as mentioned before, the mold is a sign that there are other issues that might come before mold. There are also, importantly, many issues that come after mold that mold is a symptom of, such as water damage. If it gets bad enough, it can jeopardize the structural integrity of a building. And we're likely underestimating the number of buildings, much like when the pipes burst at Heritage House last year. We're likely underestimating the number of buildings who are in serious structural problems, and mold will be one more tool to get ahead of these before they get to the point of no return. And if there are concerns about the city's capacity to enforce Board Bill 125, the city can provide the budget for it. It's a responsibility it owes to 56% of its residents who are tenants. I promise it's worth the money and it's overdue. I want to thank Alderman Schweitzer for also pointing out that inspectors are already finding mold in buildings now and are unable to act due to gaps in current law. It has the capacity to do some good right now, and it can do more if it prioritizes budget accordingly. It's much better to address these problems early on before it causes chronic health problems for residents and causes undue trauma for those same residents that have a reasonable expectation that when they give up 30 to 50% of their income, they get a home that is livable. Thank you.
Maisha Johnson, in support.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak and being present. For me, I am in support because I have an asthmatic. And I've been in the tenant work for almost 10 years now. Wow. And so this is a common conversation that I have with renters. And it doesn't only affect them financially, because they're usually the one that has to care for it when it's in a space, but it also affects the ability to be them full selves when being a parent, as well as being able to care for the responsibilities of the home. When making reports to landlords, tenants are often scared to do so because there's nowhere else to go, or in fear of the next space that they go to is identical to the experience that they're living in the moment. What I would like to see is that landlords be held accountable when this shows up into their space, and that it doesn't fall back on to the renter, because we're already struggling. Yes, we just got Prop A passed, but it's a fight to be able to live and afford where you live when there's already not really affordable, accessible housing. And so a lot of renters, as a renter, we experience the mold and also a lot of other code violations. But if this bill was passed, it can make a lot of homes livable, but also help with other health issues that cannot be addressed by saying this building is the reason. When a person is experiencing mold in their home and having to take the extra money that they have to eat or to clothe their children or to pay their bill, then it becomes, oh, am I going to be able to pay my rent? Which falls into a whole nother category. So I ask that you take into consideration that the renters in St. Louis really needs this bill to pass so we can have affordable, accessible, livable housing. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Randall Wilder.
My name is Randall and I live in Ward 8. I'm here today to testify in support of the passage of Board Bill 125. I'm both an impacted tenant who has lived experience with this issue, and I'm also employed as the housing paralegal at Arch City Defenders, where I see this issue impacting my clients every day of the week. A pipe burst in my laundry room in February, causing severe water damage that led to mold growing through and underneath the wall. My landlord had the wall ripped out and left it open with mold exposed for 6 months. My landlord finally had the wall replaced without treating the mold, and lo and behold, thick mold grew underneath the wall again. This time my landlord left the wall open, mold exposed for another 3 months. I'm an exemplary tenant who pays my rent on time every month, and there was no recourse I could take to have this issue fixed sooner, so I was forced to live in moldy conditions for the better part of the past year. I've experienced frequent allergy symptoms and have had to purchase air purifiers to combat these symptoms, but I would have rather my landlord just fixed it as he was supposed to when I told him about it nearly a year ago. In terms of my clients' experiences, my own experience seems mild. I've visited client homes in which the mold is so severe that the floor squelches and feels soft with each footstep. I've seen mushrooms growing from my client's living room floor. I've seen mold so pervasive it looks like someone ran a paint roller dipped in black paint across the walls. I've seen my clients experience numerous medical issues while living in homes with untreated mold. I've most frequently seen the young children of my clients diagnosed with asthma. The longer the mold goes untreated, the longer the exposure, the worse the health issues. The fact of the matter is, becoming a landlord means you're entering into a business contract in which you're legally obligated to maintain habitability within the space you're renting out. I can tell you from both my professional and personal experiences, most of the landlords in St. Louis City are not fulfilling their professional obligations. You wouldn't go to a restaurant, never receive your order, and still pay for the food you did not receive, let alone pay for moldy food. St. Louis currently has the highest rate of childhood asthma in the country, with 1 in 5 kids being diagnosed at a young age. There's a significantly disparate impact of mold on Black communities, and the elderly and children are more deeply affected too. With climate change and flooding in the area constantly worsening, mold will continue to be a major issue affecting our most vulnerable community members. That's why it's so important to pass this bill, to give tenants recourse and direct action to take in these circumstances so they can avoid future devastating effects on their homes and health, and to hold landlords accountable to the business agreement they signed up for. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more speaker, Catherine Bishop.
My name is Catherine Bishop. I have lived in St. Louis since I was 4 years old. Unfortunately, I have several family members whose health have been severely impacted by mold. A household in my extended family, whom I'm very close with, had black mold growing in their walls and all over their home for years without them knowing. I visited them many times as a kid. I always had fun, and for the most part, I felt safe there, but something in my body felt off. It was like I could never breathe in or out quite right, as if something was holding my lungs back. I would get headaches that I chalked up to stress, but it felt different in this house than at my own home or at school. I loved being there to play games and eat food with my siblings and cousins, but there was always something in the back of my mind whispering at me to leave. The parents of this home have always been hardworking, caring, and God-loving people, but there was something causing them to act differently than what I know is in their hearts. There were often times when the father of the household would be blinded by rage, screaming at his son, or even yelling at the rest of us kids for things that didn't make any sense. At one moment, he would be friendly, then all of a sudden, he would punish us for the most bizarre reasons. The mother would have erratic behavior that was distressing to be around. She was always bubbly and funny, but sometimes the things she said would be wildly inappropriate to speak of around children. We knew that despite these moments, they still loved us very much, so he accepted these things to just be part of who they were. Eventually, we discovered their entire home was riddled with black mold, all throughout the walls, floors, ceilings, and vents. With how much it spread, who knows how long it had been growing there. With what they had to spend on healthcare, cleaning out the mold, and repairing the damages to their home, their finances were absolutely wrecked. Even now that the black mold has been removed, they're still having to pay medical bills for all the health problems they've been left with. I suspect the mold issue has been going on since they first moved into the home, which was before I was born in 2000. They had no idea it was there when they moved in. When they finally discovered it, the property manager blamed them and refused to pay for any of the damages or take accountability for this safety hazard. I felt angry at the injustice of it all. I find myself crying nearly daily, thinking about how my family always has to keep working and working and working without rest to keep themselves afloat. How can they recover their health if they always have to work more to pay off all the debt they rack up to fix the mess the mold made in their lives? The mold caused symptoms that are still happening years later. On top of the property manager not helping nor respecting my family for the pain their disregard caused, the doctors haven't been the best either. Recently, the mother was put on lockdown for her psychosis, where none of her loved ones could speak to her except for her husband. She was not allowed to leave the house. I don't see how staying inside with no one to cheer you up and no fresh air is the right treatment for mental breakdown, especially when it's in the very same house that is the root of her psychosis. I'm worried our healthcare providers don't know how to properly care for victims of black mold, but I believe in them to learn more and do better. The reality is, everyone deserves a clean living environment, a healthy body, and a sound mind. Without mold protections, our community is not able to feel the full love and interconnectedness that we should. We need to support each other, and we can never do that if we are so sick that we can't even understand ourselves. I urge the committee to pass BB 125 because no one should have to live with the ramifications of corporate laziness, greed, and corruption. My family and the entire St. Louis community has a strong and undying spirit of industry, perseverance, and resilience. Tenants and property managers must have the same if they are to serve our community. Thank you.
We have no more speakers.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Spicer.
Thank you, everyone who spoke today. That testimony was very moving and a real testament to the time and effort that you all take to make sure that no one else has to be affected and that we have some recourse. So again, thank you so much for being here and speaking.
All right, any of you all have any follow-up questions? No. All right, you're welcome to close.
Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate
I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood Alderman Cone.
Thank you. I just want to make clear, my request to have the building commissioner or one of his designees here is to ensure that we have people on the record around what we are doing to enforce what we are doing. I mean, there are so many situations where this is going to take place. So, or is already taking place. I kind of enumerated some of them, but there are situations where other people's property causes mold in other people's property. So I've got one happening right next door to me, in fact, a couple doors down, where a very well-known slumlord in St. Louis who owns hundreds of properties has a property that doesn't have gutters, doesn't, take care of the roof. That has impacted the tuck pointing of the property. There's AC units that are in the gangway that are unventilated, have trash and refuse building up around them, which causes obviously, situations with, the rental property and its, HVAC system, but it causes problems for the neighbor's house as well. So the lack of gutters, causes more rainfall and more rainwater to rush down the side of the other neighbor's home, causing tuck pointing and, other issues for them. The blocked gangway, that has trash, refuse, dead mice, dead animals in the gangway causes health concerns and other issues for the property owner next door, and also causes more water going into their basement, which causes a damp basement that then can, cause mold occurring. That is a owner occupied home that is being, caused harm, underneath, someone else's issues that the building division is not enforcing. This is something I, as an alderman, have brought before the building division and have requested inspections to be done. The neighbors have requested the building division to do their job. We've been told that it's going to housing court, that it's, it's still not fixed, and it still causes mold in neighboring properties. So this is something where, I think, and this is why I said this at the very beginning, it's important to have these conversations with the departmental staff who are going to be responsible for the enforcement of this. My remarks should not be construed as though I'm not supportive of the bill. I believe I asked to be a co-sponsor. Madam Clerk, if I didn't, please add me. And I plan to vote for it. But at the end of the day, this is an opportunity for us as legislators to be able to have these department heads on the record in terms of where they're going to be, providing their support and operationalizing these types of policies. And I think that that's really important for us to do, because otherwise it's going to be challenging for us to hold them to account later down the road. So with that, I close. Oh, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other alders who had any final comments? Alderman Aldridge?
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm really maybe just holding the floor so that the chairwoman get back, because I know she probably want to vote on the bill. But
It's okay. I can call for previous roll.
oh yeah, well, I'd like to make a motion that we pass Board Bill number 125 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous roll.
Okay.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Alderwoman Schweitzer. We can go on a brief recess while we wait on Madam Chair to return. Her bill is our next one that we'll be discussing.
Do you want to set a time?
Going to start back up with our HUD's committee meeting. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Alderman Clark Hubbard? We're live? Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. So I guess we're back live now. We are waiting for the next bill and waiting for our colleagues to come back. Yeah. You just wanted me to talk? Okay. Hello.
No, come on. I was just calling you over because we were getting ready, because they were getting ready, so I
Okay,
wanted you to
sorry.
be over here. But thanks for filling in. Nothing.
Can you sing us a song?
Okay. We're moving through the agenda now to Board Bill 126.
Okay. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, you're recognized to open.
All right, thank you. We're picking back up on Board Bill 126. I do have some amendment. I have an amendment that's in the drive. I think we'll go ahead. I do have the mayor's administration and some department heads who I thank for their patience, but they do have some tight schedules. So we're going to rearrange some of the agenda for the speakers today, but I want to make sure that you all have the amendment in front of you all so that we can go ahead and move that and move on Board Bill 126 as amended.
I make a motion to bring Amendment 1 in front of us.
Second. Well, we don't.
All right.
Do you want to do a motion to adopt, Alderwoman?
Uh,
And then we can discuss it after you make the motion?
What we'll do, because I was just informed that we had to make some changes in the way that we're going to present this amendment that just came through a minute ago. So I don't want to be respectful of you all and let you all see it first before we move on. So let's go ahead and get started with the speakers. And then in the interim of that, please be looking through those now multiple amendments.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and let Mr. Boyd open up and then call up the speakers that need to be heard first.
Thank you, Chairwoman. If I could request the clerk to pull up the presentation.
And can you please reintroduce yourself for members of the public watching?
Sure. Thank you, Alderwoman. Good afternoon. My name's Jared Boyd. I have the pleasure of serving as Chief of Staff to Mayor Tashara Jones. I'm here today to testify in support of Board Bill 126 in efforts to reallocate ARPA funding that the city has received. And thank you for your flexibility this afternoon. Last week, the mayor's office and several department heads worked and covered a lot of ground with respect to funds that are currently obligated and at work in the community. Today, we want to spend some time with the actual amount of funds that are currently not reflected as obligated, and there's a lot of nuance around these funds as to where they actually reside. So we have several department directors who will walk through each and every unobligated dollar in the city and explain how some of our processes or where we are with some of these contracts. So as stated, we have a presentation, but we're going to try and rearrange things, particularly for some of our department directors who have other obligations, which include trying to spend some of this ARPA money today. So as I stated last week, we talked about some of the implementation takeaways and the use of funds. Today, we're going to really dive into department updates around funds that are not reflected as obligated in the transparency portal or the report that that many of you have. So, next slide. So as I stated last week, we've had extensive conversations with the Board of Aldermen and all our department directors around this impending deadline required for obligating all ARPA funds for this year. So as a result of those conversations, provided hard deadlines that unobligated funds would be swept into Board Bill 126. So here we are. So next slide, please. So we will provide, this is a summary of additional funds that are going to go into the sweep, and the directors that represent those various departments can talk about those unobligated expenditures when their time comes. Next slide. As we discussed last week with Department Director Rich Bradley, the funds that are being swept will go to our 911 dispatch center, and he is here to answer additional conversations or answer additional questions that may have come up between last week and this week. Next slide. Next slide. So as reflected at the end of October, a snapshot showed that approximately 82% of funds were obligated, and that there were still some funds that need to be obligated before the end of the year. And we're going to go through, like I said, each and all of those expenses and explain where contracts are and contextualize the fact that this is a snapshot, and kind of talk you through that process. Next slide. So I'm not going to belabor this point too much, but when we talk about obligated funds, we talk about funds that have either been appropriated through the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, the Board of Aldermen, where we have contracts that are going and approved by ENA or BPS, and then the comptroller actually signs that contract. It is at that point that the comptroller, or subsequent to that the comptroller assigns a purchase order to that particular contract, and that is when SEMA is able to note the expenditure is obligated. So the assignment of the purchase order is the notice provided to SEMA that a contract is obligated. But legally, I guess it's really when that contract is signed by the comptroller's office. Next slide. And we're going to actually, next slide. Next slide. And I'm happy to provide you with these slides at a subsequent time. They're just explainers on how certain funds are obligated. I think the important takeaway is all of the expenditures that require ENA approval have received ENA approval. There are some expenditures that require BPS approval. The vast majority have already passed BPS, and Rich Bradley can discuss those issues as well. Next slide. So we're going to slightly rearrange the order, but before we go into specific departmental updates, I do want to again contextualize the numbers that are provided as a snapshot at the end of October. And departments are going to talk, like I said, about the different numbers that they have based upon more current data and their knowledge of where contracts are in city processes. There are some appropriations that we have tracked that have been signed by the comptroller's office and didn't have purchase orders as reflected in October. So department directors will note when that occurs and talk about BPS. They'll talk about some of their expenditures as well. So with that, I'll go to the next slide and we go through the Department of Human Services. Unfortunately, they're doing a readout of our important East-West Gateway work today around housing and the unhoused. So our department director, Adam Pearson, has to be a part of that discussion. We're excited about that work, but unfortunately can't be in two places at once. So Grace from our office is going to walk through the expenditures, the unobligated funds in that department, fund by fund.
Thanks, Jared. For the record, Grace Kyung, Senior Advisor in the Office of the Mayor. So I will try my best to be Adam today, but forgive me if I misspeak ahead of time on anything. I am using talking points provided by him. So this is a quick snapshot from October and how many funds have been appropriated, programmed, and spent by the Department of Human Services. If you go to the next slide. So I will go through this each line by line, and Jared shared, if you have any questions, happy to follow up with Adam and share them afterwards. So for mortgage assistance, this is currently in the upcoming Board Bill 126 reappropriation bill. There wasn't a lot of demand for mortgage assistance. One-year contracts took 2 years, and there weren't a lot of filings due to COVID. For accounting and legal compliance, this is also in the reappropriation bill. This was used previously on admin expenses, accountant salaries, and compliant officer salaries, and the remaining funds were unspent by DHS, and they've identified that they don't have remaining funds. For intentional encampment, this is also in the reappropriation bill. There was funding that DHS didn't spend down on this line item, and as they received feedback both from the mayor's office and the city councilor's office, they couldn't spend additional funding on non-intentional encampment activities. At the time of this discussion, there were no intentional encampments operating in city limits. For emergency shelter, all of the funds will be obligated for a contract with service providers at the Jefferson Spaces project. For emergency shelter St. Patrick's Center, there are 2 contracts, and this money wasn't fully spent down by the vendor, so was obligated for an extension of the Jefferson Spaces operational contract to take the program through 2025. Both contracts are for the Women's Night program and will be used for that purpose. For emergency shelter Gateway 180, this money wasn't fully spent down by the vendors, so it was obligated for an extension of the Jefferson Spaces operational contract. And then case management and program operations, they have a contract with United Way that will be used for that purpose. The contract is already executed but didn't go into effect until January. So this is a contract from January through 2026. And this money will pay for staff time for a team member that assists with project coordination. And the entire balance has been obligated. For wraparound service, the remaining funds from this line item are in the current reappropriation bill. The original contract was for Ptolemy, and Ptolemy is a vendor that allows us to do visual data mapping, and DHS found that they will not use the remaining about $700 there. And next slide. So for rapid rehousing, DHS has 6 vendors who did not spend down the funds. All of this is obligated. The vendor could not spend down on the full contract amount, so they broke it into 2 different contracts. Extended contracts that had already had $10,000 went to the Urban League's existing rapid rehousing contract, and the contract remaining went to Doorways for the rapid rehousing contract. For permanent supportive housing, this is in the current reappropriations bill. The vendor did not spend down completely on contracts and did not have permanent supportive housing contracts to extend. Next line item is housing stabilization. Oh. So all of this is obligated. They broke the money into two different categories. They extended the contract with St. Patrick's Center for operation of Grace House, in other words, the Safe Haven, which is a low barrier shelter. And then they also put out an inclement weather RFP for the balance remaining of $198,000. And the selection committee has awarded 2 contracts with Gateway 180, and that money is continuing to move forward. So affordable housing production and preservation, all of this is allocated at this time after determining that DHS did not have the capacity to spend this line item. They transferred it to CA, whose primary role is to execute on projects that fall in line with this line description. And so Adam has shared that CDA will speak more on that. Housing stabilization, contracts executed to put all the money towards the operation of Jefferson Spaces. And then the Impacted Tenants Fund, they have a signed contract back from the vendor who is Employment Connections, and they're preparing to start operating on this project. So then I will pass it to Rich. Oh, sorry, Rich. Alderman?
Just one.
Oh, sorry, Alderwoman.
It's okay, Alderman Aldridge, go ahead, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. One quick question. You said doorways. Which was that one?
Oh, sorry. I'm waiting for my computer to load.
I can come grab that for you.
Okay,
Thank
that sounds great. So I will pass it to Rich.
Are there any other questions from colleagues about anything that Grace just spoke about? Okay, I do have one question myself. I saw that you said that you guys extended the funding for and the name just left me, Graceway?
The Safe Haven Grace House.
Yes. Can you, I'm trying to pull the presentation up, but that was what they needed in order to be able to operate throughout the winter season?
I believe so. So I don't know, and I can follow up with Director Pearson to get you additional information. They needed to use other additional funding sources for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Rich Bradley, President of the Board of Public Service, and I'm going to walk through the funds with you just as Grace did. So if you'll notice, this is a snapshot as of the end of October of our funding, where we are to date. So if you would go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the first project that is on there is expanding broadband and public Wi-Fi. That project shows a balance of $405.90. Yesterday, ITSA put forth a requisition for that $405.90, so that should be encumbered exceptionally quickly. The next item, BPS intentional encampments, that's a reappropriation of $305,000 from an original appropriation of about $750,000. And we spent the majority of that money at the tiny homes encampment, and no further work was done there, so it was residual funding to be rolled over into the next board bill. The next item is CJCC operational funds. That's a criminal justice coordinating console, and basically what that is the salary and expenditure funding for the executive director, Nicole Barton. And the current available balance is actually $345.51, as there's a travel request currently in the comptroller's office for $1,201.54. So as soon as that's approved, that balance will be down to $300. The remaining dollars will be spent towards her salary for the remainder of the year. The next item is rec center pool renovations. That's a reappropriation of $43.75. Basically, that was a $1 million item. We have everything under contract. The majority of it's completed, and that was just residual funding underrun on a contract. The next item is rec center roof replacements. And these contracts are currently in the comptroller's office waiting for approval. The Tandy and Gamble Rec Center are waiting for the issuing of a purchase order, and Marquette and Cherokee are waiting for the comptroller's signature. So as soon as those are completed, that funding will also be encumbered. The next item on the list is the fire department firehouse replacement roof replacements. That project will be handled through a change order, and we're currently putting that together. It's in process to encumber this work under an existing contract. And I will just kind of reiterate here while I'm talking about that. The contracting process is extremely long to do construction. And so as designs got finished, and they've been working on these from day one, and most of the architects and engineering firms in St. Louis have been overwhelmed and swamped with work due to all these funds. So these designs recently came in at the end of the summer. So in order to quickly appropriate these funds, we will include those in a change order. That process is about a 2-week process, so no worries there getting that encumbered. The next item is the fire department ambulance replacements. So this item was originally a $2.2 million project. We had 8 ambulances to purchase at approximately $280,000 a piece. We purchased all of them, and there was a residual cost left over of $58, so that gets reappropriated. The next item on the list is fire department fire pumpers replacements. The original item was $8.1 million. We bought approximately 9 of those at around $900,000 a piece, and the residual left over was $620, so that also gets rolled over. The St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department match for the Police Foundation, that was a $150,000 original amount, and the Police Foundation put up $1 million, and they redid the 3 police stations around the city, and we spent all except $7,685, which again will be rolled over into the next bill. The next one is juvenile court plumbing upgrade reappropriation. That was originally a $300,000 bill. We thought we had a problem with 2 water lines. It wound up only being 1, so it underran substantially. $106,000 gets rolled over into the next bill. Medical examiner asbestos abatement project, $75,000 original cost. We spent all except about $3,951 on that, and again that gets rolled over into the next board bill. Central industrial roof repairs. This project is actually, the contract has been bid and it's in the comptroller's office right now waiting for PO for about $552,000. The remaining portion of that contract, once that contract is signed, we will write it as a change order for contingency on this project. There was work that we value engineered out of it, and so we will add that back in as a change order. Again, that process is very quick, so that all that funding should be encumbered, no worries. City vehicles, non-police and fire. There are 3 line items on here for that, and actually I want to point your attention to the 3rd line item, because the 3rd line item for $160,000 is actually the requisition to buy them, and the other 2 items are the funding that is available. The reason we haven't bought them to date is because there was actually a purchase or a requisition that was put in under the wrong account that has been cleared. So as of today, we're requisitioning to buy those vehicles. And what basically happens is the remaining balance of that funding will come from the existing capital funding. So we will make up that difference there. And we will buy these vehicles on the state contract or off the state contract. So therefore, we don't have to go through all the city bidding processes and time-consuming advertisements, so forth. So should go pretty quick. Again, no concern about that getting appropriated. The BPS DHS compliance project, that's a combined total of $679,636.76, is currently being added to a task order to the citywide contract. And now, as of yesterday afternoon, it is in the comptroller's office awaiting a PO to be issued. The next is traffic calming and roadway improvements for $5,153,049.04. Of that amount, $4,787,754.94 is a contract for paving and concrete work on Kings Highway and Union. And it's currently being added as a change order to an existing contract that we have with Gershenson. A task order is also being added to the citywide contract for $365,294.10 with SBC, and that is for work on Chippewa. So there's no concern about that. The next item is ADA traffic calming improvements. And so $10,004,248.36. Of this amount, $6,609,268.80 is in the comptroller's office, and $3,394,979.56 will be added to these contracts as a change order. The work is for the contractor paving, traffic calming, and safety improvements. So again, these last three projects are all part of the arterial street paving project, and it's just been a matter of time fighting to get these going. I'll remind you that, as I mentioned last week, we actually selected the consultants for these before the ARPA funding was ever put out. We just couldn't write the contract until the funding was in place. So we've jump-started this, and you can see how long it's taking. We're at the very end, and we're getting this done, but it's very tight in its time frame to do it, but we will get it done. The last item on the list is safety improvements for top 10 crash intersection locations. $2,944,391. Of this total amount, $2,144,391.20 is in the comptroller's office waiting for signature, and the remaining $800,000, the very last bid that we have, will bid in 2 days from now and will be issued as an emergency work authorization, and that's for the final two intersections of this project. So that is the last bid that we need to put out for this work. Just to give you a summary of where we were, because I think it's important to understand this is a total whole. So the reappropriation we're asking for is about $424,000. In the comptroller's office for approval today, $12,400,000. Currently, work change orders that are in process, $9,800,000. Paving that it will be bid later this week, $800,000. Vehicle purchases on the state contract, as I mentioned, about $249,507.44. And then miscellaneous items that still need to be wrapped up, about $1,952.95, of which I mentioned before, really only about $300 is remaining out of that item that the paperwork is not in place to get signed. Okay. I'll pass it to Bethany.
Good afternoon, Ms. Williams.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Bethany Williams, Director of Streets. How's everyone doing today? Good.
Very good. I don't know if the camera caught it, but I did see a pink and green folder. I did catch it. Yes. Okay.
Every now and then you'll see me with one. So I want to talk about the Streets Department funds that we have outstanding. As you can see on this side, you'll see what was originally appropriated to the department, what has been programmed, and what we have left, which is $7.9 million, a little over $7.9 million. You can advance the slide, please. Here on this slide, I'm going to go through, as everyone else had, line by line, to talk about some of the items. The LED street lights, you see a total of $390 there. We have started the process with that contractor to figure out what can we purchase, if it's a light bulb or something that we can use to have in stock for when an LED light needs to be replaced. So those funds will be allocated here shortly. When we talk about the trash task force, you see $39,982.64. Actually, we have a trailer camera that we are increasing we're able to purchase one camera, but we're looking at other items, the red light lights that will go on the mobile camera, things of that nature, that we can get to the $39,982. It is my hope that item will be purchased within the next 2 weeks, and so those funds will be expended. Now I want to talk about the next 4 items, which is the arterial street paving. You heard Rich talk some about the additional $8 million that will be put into arterial street paving. When we originally did this was a joint venture looking at how do we improve ADA safety features of these 5 major arterial routes. And so what we've done, the streets department was originally to do all of the asphalt paving. We have now identified additional funding so that we can hire a contractor to do the paving work on these 5 major arterial streets. So as Rich stated, those funds, the $8 million plus these additional funds, will be allocated and approved by BPS. We've transferred the funds so that a contract can be awarded and we can have a contractor to do that work as well. The mobility plan, you see $24.25 that is remaining there. We have reappropriated those funds because we have fulfilled the cost and we're just waiting on the final product of the mobility master plan. The plowing of residential streets, you see $375,000 there. We are in the process of starting a pilot program where we will purchase 3 vehicles that could assist us with plowing residential streets. Over the past time, we've done some in-house studying to identify how could we address residential plowing during winter operations. And so we've identified a special blade that will go down residential streets. We have a number of things that we have to do, improve signage in these neighborhoods to let them know that these are residential routes that we will start plowing, as well as educating the public. But it is my hope that these vehicles will be in our possession by winter, and we will be able to start this pilot project to see just exactly what this will look like for the city of St. Louis plowing residential streets. Next, we have the refuse pilot project. That $1 million is still there. We are currently working on the contract. It has gone through ENA for approval. We're working with the vendor to do that project and make sure that we're all on one page with the contract. Once everything is signed, stamped, and sealed, you will see that those funds have been totally obligated as well. Sidewalk improvements, you see we have our last final contract with TPC for $837,000, a little over that. That was SP 120, I believe it is, that will cover some additional wards that we started with the sidewalk program, which we were allocated $6 million to assist with the 50/50 sidewalk program. The last item on this agenda is additional funds. We purchased a concrete truck so that we could do some of the items in-house as far as paving. The truck that we had was kind of outdated. We would get it out in the field and we would hope that it would work. So we were able to purchase a new truck. And so these funds, this $150,000, is really to assist us in making sure all of the 28 wards, as I stated before, the 50/50 sidewalk program, so that residents would not lose their spot on the list that they submitted for 50/50 to be a part of the 50/50 sidewalk program. We are using some of those funds as well as to do additional sidewalk improvements around the city of St. Louis. But once we finish that is a project that would have touched all of the wards. We are now currently looking at overlapping a map that will show the 28 with the 14 wards so that everyone can see all of the work that has been done across the city of St. Louis with the 50/50 sidewalk program. I believe that's all of my slides. Any questions? Or back?
Don't move. Based on Directors Williams and Bradley having to leave, I do want to provide the committee with an opportunity to question them. They're not going to be able to stick.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Alderman Sanye had to step away, and she kind of tapped me to be the vice chair during this time where she's away. Starting with Alderman Cone. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just curious, Rich, you mentioned there's about $10 million in ADA and traffic calming money that's set aside that hasn't been spent yet. Are there projects specifically that are already in the pipeline for that money, or are we still like waiting for plans and needing bids and all of that kind of stuff? And I'm going to kind of get to my more direct question because I think you're aware we've got Louisiana Calm Streets that's in 3 phases. We've got some federal funding in place for phase 2. But with phase 1, we did have to rely upon some other sources for ADA curb ramps and curb cuts for sidewalks and whatnot. And we were only able to do half the street. So, and then of course we still have phase 3, which is Graveway North to Tower Grove Park. So I'm just curious, like, has that money already been programmed? Where's it at specifically? Is that something we would be able to use for Louisiana Calm Street?
Yes, let me answer that one. So the original amount for the DHS BPS 88 compliance project, as I mentioned, was $2 million. And so what happened is the Department of Human Services, David Newberger, who's the commissioner on the disabled, and my staff worked together. And as you know, the ADA transition plan is for every program in the city of St. Louis, whether it's streets, sidewalks, buildings, everything. And so the transition plan itself is a monumental amount. I mean, you're probably $30 to $50 million range for the whole city. So we started off a couple years ago with just trying to get something going so that, the United States Justice Department comes in and asks questions about that. We actually have started and we have a plan and we're attacking it, right? So the $2 million is in a very defined list. And all the projects that I'm talking about, even particularly in that money that was just is being encumbered now, is all specific locations, specific things. I can't tell you every one of them off the top of my head. I can certainly get you every piece of information on it you want. I don't have those with me today, but some are curb ramps, some are sidewalks, some could be sidewalks in a park, on a street. Just depends on what the list is. Some could be upgrades to restrooms in a building, but I would have to get you that list. But yes, they are all pre-programmed.
Okay. And then Bethany, I just blinked on the question that I was going to ask you, but it had something to do with refuse.
With the pilot program?
So, yeah, well, you and I had talked about doing a pilot program for rollout carts as well. Is that something that is part of the programmed funding for ARPA?
So
Okay.
oh, sorry, cut you off.
Oh, no.
Okay,
Please.
so this program, what it will do is it will look at our routes that we currently have, that we have not had our routes updated in a number of years. When I say a number, over 20, maybe even 30 years since our routes have been updated. This will also identify the types of cans, dumpsters, as well as roll carts. Do we have the right can in these alleys? This will also tell us how many cans we have. One thing that during the pandemic, we found a lot of our drivers or, as citizens would call in to say, we need another dumpster, our dumpster's full, we would just put additional dumpsters out in the alley. Well, now we have so many dumpsters out in the alley, and we have to make sure that these are people that are paying for our trash service, 1, and 2, is this the right dumpster? We see a lot of illegal dumping. My vision I can only hope a couple of things will come out of this, but most importantly, this will limit the amount of illegal dumping because we won't have as many just open trash cans where we don't have residents living. In some of these blocks, we may have, where originally we had, 10 streets or 10 houses serving 1 or 2 or 3 dumpsters, where now it's only one family that's living there, and the other homes have been torn down. But if you go down these alleys, you will still see these dumpsters are out. And so that means a couple things. One, our drivers, they're picking up what they see. It's no tag on our dumpsters that say, Bethany's paying for service, this house is not paying for service. No, when we go down the alley, we're picking up all the trash that's there in those dumpsters. So this will tell us, one, who all's paying for service, which we can cross-reference that with the water department now, as well as do we have the right type of dumpsters? And some of these routes, they can be converted to roll carts. We have a number of alders that have asked me about, I want my ward converted to roll carts. This will be the data that we need to support that effort, as well as they will do a pilot program in some of our worst areas as well.
Yeah, I just really wanted to highlight that specifically because I think it's really important that, these things take time, and it's not something that we can just flip a switch on sometimes as much as we might want to. And you and I have had this conversation offline. I just want to make sure that it's out in the public domain as well. But we've had situations where we have a lot of illegal dumping in the 3rd Ward, former 25th Ward, Dutchtown, Gravois Park, Mount Pleasant, and the neighborhoods around there, Carondelet, which I share with the alderwoman from the 1st Ward, and we have switched some. One block in particular that was just really awful, from dumpsters to rollout carts. And, the change wasn't easy for people. There was a lot of calls and complaints about it when it happened. But since then, there's been a noticeable decrease in the amount of illegal dumping that has taken place in that, particular block. And people actually really prefer having their own individual trash because they're not cleaning up after other people's mess as well. Right. And so it's been, and then I also don't get the calls about the commingling of trash on those blocks either. So, I think that I don't believe the entire city is ready for that type of transition, and dumpsters still make sense in situations. Right. I had honestly not thought about, parts of our city where we have dumpster service and we still only have a handful of families that are living on those blocks. Dumpsters absolutely, I've been talking about this since the first day I got down here and went through my first budget cycle. Dumpsters absolutely promote illegal dumping. There's no accountability for what happens in our alleyways. And so whether that's a landlord or whether that's a contractor that didn't pull a commercial dumpster permit, or any number of other things. The alderwoman from the 11th Ward, for the last 2 years has been talking about tires and the illegal dumping of tires. Those are all symptomatic of the dumpster culture that we have here in the city. Sure. And so I want to, just call that out and applaud you for your efforts in wanting to be creative around service delivery, because those are the types of improvements that our constituents are begging for. And while we're on that, I think it really kind of came to the public light when, we had the shortage of drivers, plus equipment services, which predated this administration. But St. Louis is a bit of an anomaly when it does come to our dumpster service, and that our dumpsters and our trash trucks are basically the only of their type in the region. And so I'm just curious if any of the ARPA money is going to possibly be used to maybe standardize our collection process with other municipalities around the region, so that, and I know that there's some back stories as to why that might be still true to this day, why we have our own design of dumpsters and design of trucks and things of that nature. I won't get into all of the conspiracy theories around it that I've heard over the years, but I'm curious if that's part of this evaluation as well.
Yes, that will be a part of this evaluation. The time you speak about was my first summer here, and well, as director, I lived here before, but not being able to collect all of the trash service because of those problems that you named with the number of people in our fleet, problems that we were having, and me making those calls to our neighboring cities, counties, even companies in the area across the country, and not being able to find companies that could come in and pick up our trash and assist us with the amount of trash that we had left over on a weekly basis in the city. So that is part of this. Identifying the type of fleet that we need to change to, the types of cans. When I speak of, is the can the right size? Also, that will determine the mechanism that we dump the cans with. So all of this will come out of this report and give us the ability to figure out how do we budget with fleet services and purchasing of trucks. I think that this plan will give us, or I know that this plan will give us things that we can do quickly, and then things that we can budget over 2 to 3 years, that we will see this mass layout across the city of St. Louis with our trash service. I think another thing that this will do, help us with recycling. You know, if you have limited space, you have your own roll cart, that's gonna hopefully encourage recycling amongst our residents, and then we can live in a more competitive market when we pay for recycling service and taking items to the MRF as well. So I see a number of good things that will come out of this. It has taken some time for us to get to this point, but I'm excited the work that it will produce for us.
Yeah, I am too. I think just the engineering component to our trash trucks and the dumpsters, it's prone to breaking down. The arm itself lifting heavy loads, the manner in which it does, it's just, I've never understood why we use the trash, trucks and dumpsters that we do to this day. And so I do want to applaud the administration for taking that on, because change is never easy and progress is never fast enough. And, these things are, certainly things that will make a huge impact in our citizens' lives on a daily basis. And so look forward to seeing, the plans and the evaluations, but also the of it, at least in the pilot program form, if not on a larger scale. And then lastly, well, maybe two things. 50/50 sidewalk. I know that folks had kind of gone through the wards, all of them is my understanding, to at least survey the sidewalks in each ward based off of requests or complaints that had come in through CSB. Speaking for a ward that, does have a high transient population, a high, number of investor-owned properties. And I know it's kind of a similar situation in many parts of North St. Louis, where people aren't necessarily reporting those concerns to CSB because they just don't expect the city to do anything about it. Generally speaking, 50/50 sidewalk requests have come in from predominantly owner-occupied neighbors or neighborhoods. How are we ensuring that there's equitable distribution of the sidewalk repair program and not just based off of CSB complaints and 50/50?
So originally, when we were given the $6 million, we sat down and looked at all of the requests that had come in. We sent the inspectors out because we noticed that we had requests that went back to 2017, I believe it was. So we sent inspectors out. Some were closed out and just had never been closed out in the system. Some, they, were marked out, never done. The contractor may have never completed the work. So we were able to evaluate the list that we had. And once we did that, then we sat down and realized this is all of the city of St. Louis. And so that's where we went in and put the 214,000 per ward based off of the 28. We knew as a city we were changing to 14 during this same time. but it just was not fair. If we would have moved to the 14 ward system, and then you would have had people that were on the list that have been on the list for years. Now, when you combine these wards, you may move down on the priority list or on the request list to participate. So that's why we've always stressed making sure we kept the 28 wards. We've gone in order of that they appear in the system, and we just wanted to make sure that each ward was touched with the 214,000 per ward. Now, I will say, Zach has got an increased number of people wanting to participate because they see the work being done. And so they are in the community and they're working with residents, and people are coming out and they're like, well, how can I get my sidewalk done? You know, he's meeting with these residents to say, this is a program, this is how it works. You know, we may not be able to get to you with these funds, but we have other funds. He's made a request up front with alders, like, these are the remainder of your list in your ward. What's your pleasure? How would you like to move forward with some of this 50-50 sidewalk work? As well as we will continue to look for grant opportunities. You know, it's my hope that I get I call it a deputy, but it's not, that will really focus on policy and grants and how can we get more funding to help us with some of these things that the city is just not able to budget at this time, because these are important points. We want to make sure that everyone has modes of transportation and they are safe. And so that's something that I believe in. I believe that's something why Mayor Jones brought me here, was because of my belief in making sure that all modes of transportation was equitable and fair. And so we are committed to making sure we improve that transportation no matter how you get across the city.
And I lied. I actually have two more questions. So I thought I had one. The next one is related to paving. Just to get on the same page, because I keep getting conflicting answers here. Are we doing chip and seal for general maintenance of residential streets? Like, is that something that we can use ward capital for? Or is this, because I was told yes, and then I was told to get lists of streets, you know, to Kent, and then I've been told that, you know, we're not doing chip and seal anymore, even though we've got the equipment for chip and seal. So I'm just...
So chip and seal, I try to look at it on a larger scale. The problems across the country, the problems that in my former life that I've had with chip and seal, the claims, the legal claims that it brought to the department, to the contractors when we did chip and seal products. So ultimately, I was like, no to chip and seal because of what it could do, the blowback from using chip and seal products. Then I was convinced that we have different products now. The department has its own equipment that has not been used in a number of years. And so I said, let's look at it. What does this look like? Not looking at one street chip and seal. It had to be an area that we could evaluate and determine if this is the best product for these residential streets. And later talking to Kent, I know that he had worked with you and maybe some other alders about some possible streets and areas. I think it was more of the equipment that we saw. It hadn't been run in a very long time, and the cost that it would take us to get this equipment back up and running was the issue that we were seeing. I'm not going to stand here and say that I'm totally against a chip and seal, because our residential streets, we're currently looking at our pavement choices. This is even for our arterials. I think starting paving on Kings Highway taught me, if nothing else, that we really have to evaluate our pavement treatments that we use across the city of St. Louis. And that will be one that we will evaluate to see how do we move forward. But right now, in this current space, we are not equipped. Our equipment is not there. Plus, I probably would have to train the staff to go out and do this type of treatment, this surface treatment, that is just not a good place for us currently at the time.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because the conversation about chip and seal actually evolved from just having a maintenance program for streets, particularly residential streets, And one of the examples that I used is we just recently, retarred the parking lot over here behind City Hall. So you just spray, a surface protector down on top of the asphalt. Obviously, the asphalt has to have, any of the potholes and things of that nature repaired before you do that. But instead of just doing grinding out and, putting down new asphalt, it's something that helps to extend the life of the asphalt that costs much less than we, spend repaving a street. And the flip side to that is when we are repaving a street, I went carless a couple months back. So I'm in a golf cart driving around the city and I get to see very close the condition of our streets. And this, I try to stay on streets under 30 miles per hour and, safety first, all of that fun stuff. But occasionally, not all of our streets have, direct access. So I have to pop on another street to get some. But I'm saying that because I was just on Clark Street, or not Clark Street, it was Clark and I believe 8th Street this morning. And it was freshly paved, but the seams that are in the street are very, very obvious. And when you have that type of paving, it's going to have failure. So it's going to create more potholes. It's going to create, problems just across the board with longevity in general. And, that's our teams that are doing that. And I don't know if this is like a training gap or if it's the material that we're using or the equipment that we have. But it seems as though, and we went through this actually with the Louisiana Calm Street on phase 1, where, there's very apparent, seams and, where they're paving. And it just, a few winters in, and it's going to be a mess. And so I'm just wondering, what can we do to address that?
So
in terms
we
of
are
the quality?
looking at training of our staff. I think with us moving the funds or me taking the approach to move these arterial routes that are in the ARPA dollars to contract paving, and our staff stick more with residential streets that are one pass. You don't, have to do too much adjustment to the machine, but also just giving them more training on how to operate the equipment. So it is my plan and my hope that this winter we will be able to bring in some companies that can do some training with the staff, just so that they are aware about, how to use the equipment, how to use the machine. I even talked to some of the guys, like, when is the last time you all did major arterial paving? And they're like, oh, it's been years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, we know that it's been years since we've paved Kings Highway, Lindell, these types of streets. And so we just want to make sure that we give the best product to our citizens, as well as it has longevity as well. And so that's why with the arterials, I went with asking, could we move the, move that to contract work instead of internal work being done. Okay. But that will be training that we will look to implement.
I was just reminded by the chair that there's a time boundary here, so I just want to allow my colleagues another opportunity to ask questions as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Cohn. Alderman Browning.
Thank you. I have no additional questions.
Alderman Aldridge.
No additional questions.
Thank you. I have one question. I think we've been waiting for a lot of our street projects to be paved in our wards because we're told that the streets department was working on ARPA paving and that our ward projects might not happen as quickly. How does this work now? I mean, does that mean that we should expect ground to be broken and on the streets that we're paying for with ward capital funds more quickly?
So yes, once your funds have been allocated and they've been transferred to the streets department, we will start with the next season, not now, because the season's over for paving pretty much
Well,
now.
St. Louis Works bill passed months ago.
Okay.
And so those projects haven't been completed.
So they'll be completed next season.
Okay, so they're planned,
They are
and there's okay. Well, thank you very much for that With that, I don't think there's any further questions from members of the committee. I do want to say thank you to the Board of Public Service for stepping up to get those contracts done with paving. I know that's a lot of extra contract work for you all, so I appreciate that. Moving on, Alderman Clark Hubbard, whoever's next. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Aldermen. Craig Schmidt, I'm the Government Services Analyst for the Health Department. Our Director is traveling and our Commissioner Anwari is here. I do want to thank Grace Kyung and Seema and our fiscal and comptroller people who have put a lot of this together along with our Commissioner. Spoiler alert, much of this will be reappropriation executed contracts where we're waiting for the purchase orders or spending as we speak for those requisitions. So we can go to the next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you very much. So I can't see that slide anymore, but I think that first slide is for the $399,169. The contract was signed by the comptroller, and we're waiting on the PO, as I indicated earlier. Okay. The next one is for $5,975. This is Ad Graphics. So we're working with the Supply Commissioner for the official wrapping. You may have noticed some of the outreach vehicles. One of them was done already. The second one still needs to be done, and we'll be submitting a purchase order on that one. The next one is a reappropriation, $1,975. And so you may recall that we had the Reproductive Equity Fund, and some of the funds were not able to be spent. We had quite a number of contracts. Some of those are obviously being spent. Thank you so much. My eyes are different than the last time I was in this room. So those monies are being reappropriated with this Board Bill 126. The next one is for incentive cards. That again is reappropriations, $39. We were working with folks to do COVID vaccinations. We now have a contract for incentive cards, no longer need the $639.30 ourselves. The next one is with the Integrated Health Network. That amount is for incentive cards, and that is a contract that's been executed, and we're waiting for the, well, actually on that one, we have a purchase order, and there are two separate project numbers, and so somehow no one's caught up with that, but that will, we will be catching up with that, and that is already set to be spent. The next item is for animal care and control for $236,236.91. So we have spent $304,000 for animal care and control vehicles. We're waiting for the invoices on those. There's a remaining $42,236 that will be spent before the end of the year. Some of those items will be portable radios, catch poles, cat nets, and other animal care and control equipment. So those monies will be spent, are being spent. The next item is on behavioral health, $272,148.95. And that has a contract that's been executed. We're waiting for the purchase order on that as well. I told you that was a spoiler alert, so that definitely is the case. Emergency preparedness, $864,566.38. Some of that has been used, and then others is being reassigned. So in the ARPA reappropriation bill, $400,232.24 is being swept into that Board Bill 126. $464,334.14 are therefore left. $400,000 is going to Heat Up St. Louis, which has an executed contract. Again, we're waiting for the PO. And then there's supplies of $64,334.14. There's been one tranche of that has been spent. Another tranche will be spent by the end of December for some orders that are pending, including automatic emergency defibrillators on our building that we have. And that's important, of course. The next item is $500,000 for maternal health support. And that, again, is a contract. I may mispronounce this. It's Carady House. It has a contract and a project number. We're waiting for the PO on that one. And then the last one is on medical debt forgiveness, and that's also in the reappropriation bill. The contractor was unable to coordinate with some of the healthcare providers in order for this very important work to occur. We hope that it will continue to occur, but we can't hold on to this money. That those $800,000 are being swept into this Board Bill 125 for the reappropriation. And that, I believe, is the end of my presentation. So Alderwoman Schweitzer, you are the last holdout if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. We'll just keep moving with the presentation and do questions at the end. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have anything you want?
Thank you so much for helping me.
No problem. No problem, Ms. Smith. As Mr. Pinckney comes up here, are these yours, Mr. Smith? Oh, okay. I want to take a point of privilege here to publicly thank Mr. Pinckney for his service. I'm gonna be honest, when I opened up that email, I was hoping it was wrong, but as bad as I want you to stay here, my relationship that I've built with you, I know that there's probably even so much greater work that you can do. I've worked with you closely, not just legislatively, but out in the community as well. You always show up 100% authentically yourself and with the greater good of the community at heart. So I thank you for your dedication and your commitment to this Office of Violence Prevention and putting it, standing it up, right, and being able to show the work of that faith and how we believe that work can improve our communities and make our communities safer. So, Alderwoman Schweitzer and I, we are standing here in the gap to say thank you. I think he deserves a round of applause. This is that was ever done before. And again, we wish you. I wish you well and Godspeed. I'm gonna miss you, but hey, don't forget. And if there's ever anything I can do to support you, stand or be a testimony to your work.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting it. I appreciate that very much. And while I may not be here, I'm still committed to St. Louis. I love it. It's a great city, great work, great people. So however I can continue to be of service, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you for having me. I'm going to go through our work. Ours is going to look a little different just because as we created this office, a lot of money was transferred in from the health department and other places. And so we were navigating a lot of that as we moved through expending the ARPA funds. We had some contracts that were terminated. We were fortunate to get additional money in this last budget cycle. So as those contracts were terminated, we were moving money to other contracts, or we were using them for other contracts that we ultimately engaged in. So I'm going to go through our, you see this summary here, but I'm going to go through line by line like everyone else and explain what's going on as you see the different spaces. So the first line, behavioral health response. This was where we had some money that came over from the health department because of the work that started there. What you're seeing is what was left over, what was expended from a $5.1 million contract that was or is obligated. And so those funds were obligated. The $262,000 were additional funds that were transferred over and were used. And then there's a reappropriation of $160,000, which is the difference between 2.7 million that was transferred over from the health department, and the $2,539,129.31 that was expended. So that is in that reappropriation bill. The next you'll see is a series of contracts that are engaging that are completely obligated. One was an initial contract with the Urban League, and those funds were expended, the $106,570. The same with Freedom Community Center was one of our original contracts we entered into back in July of 2022. That was for $598,000, and those funds were expended. The same with Mission St. Louis, Diamond Divas, and then the monies for Power for STL, which is the T, were also obligated. Excuse me, I said expended, obligated. The Employment Connection, $69,000 was what was left over from a contract that was obligated, and that's what was expended. Same thing with Legal Services Eastern Missouri. We had an initial set of contracts that these are the initial contracts, and then they were subsequently amended in July of 2023. You will see Living in Victory there, Sober and Living, which a contract was entered into for $216,361.23. That was approved by E&A on August 29th. It was submitted on August 29th. It was approved on September 24th and sent to the comptroller on October 25th, and we received it back fully executed on October 31st, but we haven't done the PO yet, so there's no PO for that yet. For SSM Health, this is a great contract that is really dealing with people who are victims of gun violence and engaging them in the hospital and following them up afterwards. That contract for SSM was submitted on August 29th. It was approved by E&A on September 24th, submitted to the comptroller on October 24th, and we received it back fully executed from the registrar on October 31st, but we do not currently have a PO for that. So out of this initial tranche of funds, about $10,000 is in the reappropriation. That was those funds are left over after engaging in contracts. So we are submitting that for reappropriation. Go to the next slide. So we see another series of contracts that there was $3.6 million pot that was received for summer youth and year-round programming. You see we have these contracts where all of the funds are obligated. So with Annie Malone doing some summer programming, Gateway Y, I think everyone saw recently the news clip around the Mobile Y, so this was to fund that program. Harambe Youth Training, which does some really good work on tuck pointing and working with young people building skills. Link STL, which is in the Hyde Park neighborhoods, which does some really great summer programming. The Village, which does some really good work, I think in the near north neighborhood with job readiness, career exploration, and mentoring. That was also obligated already, and all these have POs. St. Louis Artworks, that money was obligated. They're doing some great summer programming, year-round programming there, summer and after school. Northside Youth and Senior Center, which is doing really great work in the Greaterville area. They have a drop-in program that they're setting up. Love the Lou, which is in the Lewis Place neighborhood and does some great work around mentoring. Those are all, once again, obligated in POs. We have Jean Slay Boys and Girls Club, which is running an after-school program, and the contract is for $260,000. So Jean Slay was submitted to E&A in July, on July 30th. It was approved by E&A on August 29th, submitted to the comptroller on September 20th, and we received it back fully executed with a signature from the registrar on November 1st, and we're awaiting a PO on that. Throwing and Growing, which does great work up in the Walnut Park area with young women. That is for $60,000. We have gotten that contract back and have a PO. Behavioral Health Response is doing some work in the Carr Lane and one of the other middle schools doing some behavioral work in SLPS. So with BHR, that contract is for $454,000. We have that was submitted to E&A on the 2nd of August, submitted to the comptroller on October 25th. We had to get some additional information from the provider once we got it back from the comptroller's office. We had to get some information before we submitted it back to the comptroller's office. So we're awaiting that for full execution. Next is Big Brothers Big Sisters of Eastern Missouri, which is doing some great work in Yateman Middle School, mentoring work. That contract is obligated and executed. The Boys and Girls Club is doing some after-school programming on Grand in, remembering now. The Boys and Girls Club on Grand. And the JV, Herbert Hoover, thank you very much. And the Herbert Hoover, so the Boys and Girls Club, we submitted to ENA July 30th. It was approved September 24th, submitted to the comptroller October 24th, and we received it back from the registrar with signatures on November 1st. Next slide. We are reappropriating out of that $3.6 million. We had $952.45 left, so that will be in the bill. The next group of contracts is a $10 million group, I believe, from that we were initially provided for community violence intervention programming. You'll see a line for payroll. Initially, portion of my salary was paid out of that when the office was originally founded, so that was obligated and expended. Connections to Success is doing some reentry work for us, so that contract is for $853,999.64. That was submitted to the comptroller on August 29th, submitted to E&A, submitted to the comptroller on October 24th. We did have to get some additional information from the provider. That's why it wasn't submitted to the 24th. So we haven't received that one back, and there's no PO for that yet. WASH U, this is to support the Life Outside of Violence hospital-based violence intervention program, which engages people who are victims of bullet-related injury. That was submitted to E&A on August 8th. We got it back from EA approved. We had to get some additional information from the organization, and it was submitted to the comptroller October 25th. And we don't have it back yet or a PO. The next contract is Mission St. Louis. This is the Show Me Peace Violence Intervention Program that's doing great work and for neighborhoods in the city. And so that contract, we ultimately were able to transfer over to general revenue, but this was the money that was expended out of the ARPA funds, and then the remaining funds were reappropriated. I think the original contract was about $2.1 million, I think. And so this $1 million was expended and obligated. Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, this contract was also expended and obligated. Live Free USA, this is the group that is doing technical assistance for the Show Me Peace program. Their initial contract was $165,000. That was all obligated back last year and expended. The Urban League program is the Public Safety Collaborative, which is being overseen by the Federation of Block Units. They're doing a great job. This is community approaches to environmental factors that lead to crime. And so they're doing some great work in the Wells Goodfellow area, College Hill, and they're expanding to other areas. That contract was obligated already. Ignite Hope is an organization doing some great work in counseling in the community. They serve anyone from 0 to 99. That contract was already obligated. We have POs and it's being expended. Safe Streets, Safe Neighborhoods is doing some great work responding to shooting incidents and providing connections to services and resources. So that contract was for $652,500. It was submitted to ENA August 29th. We got it back approved. We had to get some additional information from the organization, and it was submitted to the comptroller on October 25th. We haven't received it back, and there's no PO yet. Diamond Divas, $790,298.36. You know what? I want to check on. No, I have it here. Yes, I do have it. So that was submitted to E&A on August 1st. It was approved August 29th and submitted to the comptroller on 11/1. We were waiting for some more information back from that organization. Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. This is their new amendment of the initial contract. $724,434.89 have been obligated, approved, and everything's good there. Next slide. Mission St. Louis runs also a program called Beyond Jobs that works with the justice involved. That is a contract that is an amendment of a previous contract, so that has already been obligated, and we have a PO. Diamond Divas, there was an amendment to the contract. This is why I was initially confused, but that amendment goes to the dates I already gave, so that is in the comptroller's office, and we're waiting for it to return. Guardian Angel Settlement is an organization in the Gravois Park neighborhood that really is connected community, is doing some great work around trauma and working with those who have been victims of violence. A contract for $141,584.14. That was submitted to E&A on August 30th. It was approved September 24th, submitted to the comptroller October 4th, and we received it back with all the necessary signatures on November 7th. So we're just waiting for a PO on that. Power for STL, this is an amendment to their initial contract, doing great work with the bullet-related injury clinic, Dr. Punch, and so that contract for Power for STL was submitted to E&A on September 3rd, submitted to the comptroller on November 12th. There was some funds that had been transferred that we were working with the comptroller's office to. It was everything was correct, and it is. So we're just waiting for that contract back so we can get a PO. So what was left over in this pot of funds was $27,650.83, and that is in the reappropriation bill. The next group of funds are for youth diversion. It was a $6 million pot of funds. We contracted with the Youth Advocates Program, which is a national program, and hires local youth advocates. They've been doing great work. That contract for $1,685,374.80 has been obligated, and we have a PO, and is being they're expending the funds. We enter into a contract with Covenant House to oversee our youth assessment center. The contract is $1,373,011.09. That Covenant House contract, where is it at? I don't know if I have that on here. Sorry, I know that was submitted to the comptroller. I'm going to have to follow up on that one. I don't have it on here, I'm sorry. The other contract connected with this pot of funds is Youth in Need, who is going to be co-located in the Youth Assessment Center, which will be housed in Covenant House. This contract is for $119,793.71. It was submitted to E&A 829, submitted to the comptroller on October 25th, and we're waiting that back along with the Covenant House contract, I believe, but I will follow up on that. So that's $6 million. We, because it was specific to youth diversion, we weren't able to use that for some of the other community violence intervention programs we could have entered a contract with, given the timing. So $2,821,820.40 will be in the reappropriation. The next contract is related to a cohort with the National League of Cities that the city was a part of to provide assistance to post-secondary students. That is $1 million contract with Geico
doing businesses forward. It was for $1 million. That contract is obligated, executed, and with a PO. And then we have violence reduction. This was a $2.4 million pot of funds. The city is part of the Save Live Now initiative, which at the request of Mayor Jones is being led by Gateway, East West Gateway, thank you. And so we're working with our partners in the region, but specifically St. Louis County, St. Clair County, to really develop a comprehensive strategy, regional strategy for violence reduction. So as part of that, and as part of the work we do in the city already, we've contracted with 3 organizations to provide training and technical assistance. One of those is the Roca Impact Institute, a contract for $610,967. The Roca contract was submitted to E&A August 12th, approved August 29th, submitted to the comptroller on September 20th, and actually today we received it back from the registrar with all the necessary signatures, so we're just going to be waiting for a PO. The next one is with the National Network for Safe Communities, who oversees and does training and technical assistance related to focus deterrence. The contract's for $347,587.52. That contract was submitted to E&A August 12th, approved on August 29th, submitted to the comptroller on September 20th, and we received it back with all the necessary signatures on November 7th. We just do not have a PO yet. The contract with Live Free USA, which does training and technical assistance around street outreach, was for $266,200. That contract was submitted to E&A on September 11th, approved on September 24th, submitted to the comptroller on October 24th, and we received it back with all the necessary signatures on November 12th. We also have a contract, and this is an amendment of a previous contract with Freedom Community Center. It does a lot of good work around in the restorative justice space and providing support to those who are impacted by violence and who are returning from incarceration. It's a contract for $1,026,502.60. The FCC contract was submitted to E&A on August 12th, approved on September 24th, submitted to the comptroller on October 24th, and we received it back with all the necessary signatures fully executed on November 7th. And finally, Guardian Angel Settlement, I mentioned before, we split their contract between 2 different funds to make sure we were utilizing all the ARPA funds. So as I said before, we got that contract back on November 7th with all of the necessary signatures. So we're just waiting a PO. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, do you have any other speaks? Okay. We'll hear from April Ford Griffin.
Okay. Thank you, Alderman. As you can see up on the screen, you have the appropriated funds of $18,600,000, and then you have a figure for programmed funds. As we have continued to hear some different explanations as to how we report, I think that that's important to keep in mind, because that's the difference in when we have an obligated contract, which by the U.S. Treasury standards means that it's executed, and when we actually have gone through all of the city's accounting processes within the comptroller's office and city councilors and our office to actually show the expenditures. And so as far as program funds, I don't have any remaining funds to put in a contract. There's close to maybe about $50,000 that's intentionally for admin and equipment for our internal offices. Currently, for expenditures, I have $11,017,301.99 that has been paid out. So that's what we consider expenditures, because that money is no longer in the bank with the city. But until those contractees submit their financial reporting with all of their support documentation and receipts, and then our staff analyzes those, recalculates them, makes sure they're right, sometimes go back and forth until it's approved, and then we enter it into the city comptroller's system, you won't see that figure appear in expenditures. But a little over 11 million is what the city has actually paid out so far. On the second slide, you have Tiny Homes Veteran Community Project. It's showing that we have 1.149239 appropriated, 1 million as an obligation in an executed contract, and $149,239 has actually been executed. I have that contract in my office. The comptroller's office has just not sent us over a purchase order yet. Next is Peter and Paul Community Services. You have 1.821239 million that's appropriated. And actually, this one is a little more tricky. I have an executed contract for $1.7 million. The only funds remaining are an increase of $121,239 that is at the comptroller's office waiting to be signed. And then it will be considered fully executed. There's $850,000 that's not showing here as obligated. The reason being is because that money was dispersed through a wire transfer. And I have been told that with the new accounting system, Oracle, there is no way to show wire transfers. But that money was dispersed back in April of this year. So that is not going to be accurate to say that it's still $850,000 to be obligated. It's a issue of how we show it in the city's accounting system, depending on the method of payment. But those funds have been spent, and all the documentation and receipts are in our files to show that it was spent. So it's actually only $121,239 in that project, which is just waiting for full execution to be returned from City Hall.
Good afternoon. My name is Noel Pfeffer. I serve as Executive Director of the city's Community Development Administration, and I'll be going through a similar exercise today, walking you through the funds remaining to be obligated at CDA. I've also brought along, in the interest of transparency, some of our own internal tracking that you can reconcile across this and is a little bit more comprehensive. But as we go through, you can see that we have been appropriated $180 million, 450,000, of which the vast majority, 162 million, has been obligated and 39 million has been spent. That's what shows up on Oracle. As we've discussed today, Oracle lags a little bit behind reality, and so the figures in your packet show a programmed figure of $167 million and closer to $48 million in expenditures. Next slide. But we will go over the details of what remains to be set up in Oracle. And we'll start on this first line of the slide with $569,000 in the Healthy Home Repair Program. These funds are fully committed to homeowners pursuant to legally binding grant agreements with specific homeowners. However, the PO doesn't get set up in Oracle until it is associated with a specific contractor that's going to be paid out. And so that's why you have this $569,000 that's showing up as not obligated in Oracle, although it is committed to specific homeowners pursuant to legally binding agreements. Similarly, well, actually, this is a different case. Harambe is a executed contract for $150,000. However, $149,999.97 has been spent, and the grant has been closed out, which is why that PO shows up for $149,999.97. We do not currently have plans for the remaining 3 cents, but I will note that Treasury does allow us to reprogram funds when the funds are not used in full. We also were appropriated $2 million to invest in early childhood education, particularly with a focus on scholarships, training for child care development associate's degrees, and accreditation support. We awarded these funds to 6 entities, of which all but 1 are executed. That first one, Child Care Aware, was in fact executed on November 14th. 2024, and the final one remaining with United for Children is at the City Councilor's office, which must approve it as to form before it goes to the Comptroller's office. But that contract has been fully drafted, signed by CDA, and signed by United for Children, and we've also received all the various clearances from the License Collector and Collector of Revenue's office as well. With Build STL, that was $11 million appropriated to invest in partnership with SLDC into job training and workforce development with a particular focus on contractors and expanding contractor capacity. 4.25 million of that has already been obligated pursuant to an executed contract with SLDC to purchase the Monarch facility. The remaining 5.875 million is being obligated pursuant to 2 contracts. One is a $4.5 million contract with SLDC to fund the build out of the Monarch facility. That contract is currently at the Comptroller's office. The other one is a $1.375 million contract with SLDC to fund Mobilize STL. Mobilize STL is a loan fund that SLDC will work to establish with RISE to provide low-interest capital to contractors who don't have the liquidity to mobilize to win government bids. For example, a contractor might win a public bid for a project, but because the government works on a reimbursement basis or will not pay for the work until it is complete, they need that bridge loan. They need that liquid capital at the front end, and that's what Mobilize STL is going to do, is support contractors with their mobilization costs. And that contract is at the City Councilor's office. In addition, we see here $3,413,000 in unobligated affordable housing production and preservation costs. I'm going to walk through the specific projects that those funds are committed to and their status. First off, we have a $1 million award to Clinton Peabody, which is currently at the City Councilor's office. We also have a series of vacant unit turn awards, which were just awarded in August to 4 entities: Horizon Housing, RISE, Sanctuary in the Ordinary, and Carr Square. These are to provide vacant unit turns for rental units that need new furnishings or new AC or whatever that improvement is, or new coat of paint, in order to be ready to be occupied but are currently vacant. And so $454,001 of that is through a contract with RISE for 33 units, which is at the City Councilor's office. Another $445,999 is through 2 contracts with Horizon Housing, and that is currently at the Comptroller's office. Another contract is for $150,000 with Sanctuary in the Ordinary. That's currently at the City Councilor's office. And another $150,000 is for a contract with Carr Square, and that's currently at the Comptroller's office. And all of these have been signed by both CDA and the agency and are currently routing here in City Hall for execution. In addition, that brings us to $2.2 million between Clinton Peabody and the $1.2 million vacant unit turns. In addition, $700,000 is committed through an agreement with Cope Brilliant Presbyterian CDC to rehab 4700 Labadie. That is a vacant 4-family unit. Another $324,655 is with Art Place to build a new triplex on Nebraska. And $150,000 is committed towards Benton Park Place for their new build at the corner of Arsenal and Jefferson for affordable senior housing. And finally, $39,292 has already been executed and spent with Carasoft. That's for the purchase of Salesforce licenses. Because for the first time, we conducted our housing NOFA on a Salesforce-based system. And that sums up to that $3,413,947. And everything I just said is detailed out further in the packets I shared with y'all. Additionally, there's $217,000, one project with 4726 Cope Brilliant, which we are submitting for reappropriation. We awarded this project last year as part of our Neighborhood Transformation Grants funding round. Unfortunately, despite an extended back and forth, the developer ultimately was not able to move forward with the project, specifically facing really serious insurance challenges. And we're not able to secure insurance, and so we are submitting that for reappropriation in this board bill. The next item on this slide is $2.5 million. These funds have been obligated and were actually executed on October 28th, 2024. However, the PO has yet to be set up. But this $2.5 million were funds that were actually transferred to CDA from the Affordable Housing Commission. Next, moving down the line, we have a $500,000 contract with Refuse. These funds are also obligated pursuant to an interagency agreement with the Refuse Division. However, the comptroller's internal processes don't set up that PO until Refuse in turn enters into a contract. So even though they're obligated for ARPA purposes, we don't have that PO set up yet. And so that $500,000 has been executed and obligated, and that was executed on February 28th, 2024. The same is true of actually the next two. These are all the same story. With that $59,496, that is obligated pursuant to an interagency agreement with the Forestry Division, which was executed on October 3rd, 2023. The reason that these funds are outstanding is a $1.68 million agreement. The remainder of the funds have all been allocated and encumbered to specific purchases of bulk pickup equipment for forestry. But the $59,496 is what is remaining, which they're currently working with the Supply Division to encumber. In addition, there's $8,594.84. That is the only remaining funds from a $350,000 interagency agreement with Operation Brightside. The remainder has been spent down in full, and these funds will also be spent down, but they are obligated. Next, we have a $500,000 remaining contract that is currently at the Comptroller's office, which is to provide down payment assistance for homes in the West End. This was part of our Neighborhood Transformation Grants, NOFA, and was awarded to Vatterott, and will help make Vatterott homes more affordable and more accessible while keeping the comps in that neighborhood competitive and stimulating the market. The West End is one of those areas where we really want to preserve long-term affordability, but at the same time, we also want to stimulate the market, and having down payment assistance in this geography really helps us achieve both goals simultaneously of affordability with high market comps. But this contract has been again signed by CDA and Vatterott and is at the Comptroller's office. Next, we have $2,477,900 that have yet to be set up in Oracle under our Proactive Development Fund. This figure includes 3 contracts that have been executed since October 31st, including a $249,100 contract with Old North Neighborhood Restoration Services Group to rehabilitate and stabilize historic buildings in Old North. That was executed on November 6th, 2024. A $305,000 contract with Northside Youth and Senior Services to build a community center in the Ville, which was executed on November 14th, 2024. And finally, a $100,000 agreement with Mission St. Louis to continue staffing our home repair program, which was executed on November 14th, 2024. Those POs haven't been set up yet, but the funds are obligated pursuant to executed contracts. Next, we have 4 contracts that have yet to be executed, and I'll update you on the status of each. The first is an $883,000 addition to our home repair pool with a particular focus on historic home repair. As we've talked about, we are close to the end of home repair funds, and so it's imperative that we add funds, and this will add $883,000 to provide home repairs to historic homes, and that's a partnership with the planning department. And that's at the city councilor's office. Additionally, our contract with Gateway Global to fund their work to establish a geospatial campus in in Hyde Park, excuse me, is a $350,000 contract that is currently at the comptroller's office. Additionally, a $500,000 contract with Carr Square Tenant Corporation is currently at the comptroller's office. This is to fund their pre-development work for the long overdue rehabilitation of Carr Square Village. They applied for LIHTC funds last year, scored quite well, were not awarded it. They will be reapplying this year. We're helping support that application because, in fact, together with Clinton Peabody, it represents the oldest public and affordable housing in the city, started in 1942, and is in dire need of that rehabilitation. And finally, under the Proactive Development Fund, we have $90,000 committed against Benton Park Place, which I talked about previously. And this is also at the comptroller's office and has been signed by CDA, DeSales, the city councilor's office. And then the final item here on our spreadsheet is the Digital Equity Fund, where we've obligated the remainder of the funds in contracts to SLDC and to SmartWave. Our contract with SmartWave is to light up over a dozen city parks with community Wi-Fi. And this amendment to that contract will expand that work. This amendment is currently at the comptroller's office for $1,046,485. And we hope to receive it back signed and executed soon. So that brings me to, actually the last thing that I should mention is that the Department of Human Services mentioned that they are transferring $5 million to CDA for affordable housing production and preservation. And those funds have been committed pursuant to our most recent funding round. And they are committed $1 million to the Baden School Project in Baden neighborhood with Lutheran Development Group, $500,000 to Virginia Plaza with DeSales in South City, another $500,000 towards Clinton Peabody, $1 million towards Young Voices with Action for their mixed income, mixed use development on MLK, $500,000 to Sanctuary in the Ordinary to rehab a 4-family in the Bill, another $500,000 to the Cope Brilliant Presbyterian Corporation to rehab a 4-family, $620,000 to Peter and Paul to make improvements at Little Sisters of the Poor and bring vacant units online, and $380,000 to the Lafayette Senior and Family Apartments, which was recently awarded a LIHTC award, and that sums to $5 million. So with that, I think that brings me to conclusion. Thank you.
Slates.
Okay. We'll go ahead and see if anyone has any questions for for CDA, Office of Violence Prevention, or Affordable Housing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I thought we were doing questions after the building vision, but that's totally fine.
We're trying to.
Okay, I totally understand. All right, Alderman Cone, you're recognized. Okay, Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I guess more for you mentioned in your presentation several times that contracts are still waiting from the comptroller's office, and we had the comptroller here earlier saying that it seems like majority of it was waiting for the department to get to her office. So how many just roughly, how many contracts from your office are you waiting for the comptroller to take care of?
I would note that the routing process from us, we route our contracts first to the city councilor's office and then to the comptroller's office, then it goes to the registrar office and then back to us. We have roughly a similar number of contracts currently at the city councilor's office and the comptroller's office because that's just the routing process. So we currently, if I sum it up, I think I shared 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at the city councilor's office, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at the comptroller's office.
Okay. And you've executed these contracts. I know there's a process. You say go to city council then the comptroller, but you've executed probably these contracts a while ago.
Yeah, so first of all, and what's included in your packet shows that we have fully executed over 100 contracts already that have been signed by the city councilor's office and the comptroller's office. So we have been receiving these contracts back. With respect to the contracts currently at the city councilor's and the comptroller's office, I don't think any arrived earlier than October.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. I appreciate this. I think the question that I have is around just making sure that you provide information about the Mobilize program. That sounds really interesting. I know I'll have a lot of developers in applying for that. Is that a citywide program that will be available?
Yes, I believe so. And it'll be administered by SLDC and RISE, so look for a communication from them. But I will also be sure to share any information that I receive with the committee.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Any further questions from the members of the committee? Okay, we'll move on to Slate.
So good afternoon. The Slate team is at a conference this week, so I will be providing some of the notes that the director and team provided. If you can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of EDSI and the case management appropriation for $226,629.80, EDSI is a vendor or contractor that Slate regularly works with. So if you see them on this here for both case management and wraparound services, and then if you go to year-round youth jobs, these are amendments to contracts that are in the comptroller's office according to Slate. So they work with this entity on a regular basis, and these funds are waiting to be, I guess, signed by the comptroller's office. The adult education contract, actually, according to Slate, has already been paid. The vendors have actually already been paid, so waiting on the comptroller to update their software or their system to reflect that. But Slate says that those adult education expenses have actually been paid to the vendors based on their records. Spoke about the year-round youth jobs. That's in the comptroller's office as an amendment. The low barrier job contract is another contract that's in the comptroller's office. And in terms of EDSI, again, that's a contract amendment. All the EDSI appropriations are amendments that are in the comptroller's office. And then the Prison to Prosperity program, that is in the reappropriation. Next slide. So I am also speaking on behalf of the Building Division. And you can go to next slide. And all of the funds associated with the Building Division are going to or have been passed out of E&A into an interagency agreement with CDA. So that has been approved by Board of Estimate and Apportionment. It's in the City Councilor's office, and we're working with CDA to make sure that gets fully executed in time. So that covers all of the expenses for the building division. And with that, I'll entertain any questions related to Slate and the building division, and then I will turn it back over to Madam Chairwoman and the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you so much. Alderman Cone.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Browning.
No questions. Thank you.
Alderman Aldridge. Thank you for providing that information.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so can we put the amendments 1 through 11 before us?
I will need a little bit of clarity. Will we need to vote on each amendment individually, or is it all right to talk about them all at once?
It was one amendment that has been broken down, and I was informed that we can do the motion to put amendments 1 through 11 before us in one motion.
Right. We just need a motion to adopt. We don't need a motion to have it in front of us. So amendments 1 through 11 are in front of us, and when we're ready, we'll do a motion to adopt all the amendments.
Same. Yeah, that's what I
Perfect.
was asking.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Please proceed.
Oh, I thought we were going to do the motion.
You don't want to talk about it before we do?
Well,
the
that's
motion?
what we just went through. All of the amendments were reflected in the presentations that we all just.
I will entertain a motion to adopt amendment number 1 through amendment number 11 to Board Bill number 6.
So moved.
Any call for previous roll?
Previous roll.
There's been you remove your objection? Any discussion? There's been a motion and a second to adopt amendment number 1 through 11 to Board Bill 126. There's been a call for previous roll. Hearing no objection to previous roll, we've adopted amendment number 1 through 11 to Board Bill 126. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. So again, this being our second meeting, I'm asking, today I am asking that we take the very mindful vote on Board Bill 126 as amended to reprogram and reappropriate these funds that were found to the PSAP.
Thank you, Alderwoman, and we'll take questions on the bill as amended now. Alderman Cone, any questions?
No.
Alderman Browning?
No questions.
Alderman Aldridge? Okay. Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, for coming, and thank you to all of the departments and to the administration and all the staff who presented today. This was clearly an incredible amount of work. I appreciate any bill in which we're talking about just a few dollars or cents even that we're making sure are put towards the right thing, and that's how we should be doing. You know, we want to make sure every dollar, every penny of this money is spent on things that will benefit the city for, hopefully generations to come. So anything you'd like to say to close before we take a vote?
No, I just again ask for your favorable consideration and do pass recommendation on Board Bill 126 as amended.
Thank you. At this time, I will entertain a motion for a due pass recommendation of Board Bill 126 as amended.
I would move that we pass Board Bill 126 as amended with the due pass recommendation. Previous roll.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. A call from previous roll from the Alderman from the 9th. Any discussion? Any objection?
I would too, because I'm not sure if I was on the last previous roll for your
Okay.
bill.
There's been an objection to previous roll. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Aye. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. Aye. Chair Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. We have 5 aye votes.
By your vote, you have sustained the motion from the Alderman from the 9th, and we have passed Board Bill 126 as amended from committee with a due pass recommendation. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Clark Hubbard. I will turn this back over to you to wrap us up.
All righty. I want to thank again everyone for the time that's taken, the necessary time that was taken, not just today, but and not just in last week's committee hearing, but through emails, conversations, and other forms of communication that have transpired to get us to this point. Are there any resolutions for review? Any committee discussions? Madam Clerk, do we have any written testimony for acknowledgement?
We have none.
Okay. Any announcements? All right. We were all present today, so with that, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved. Previous roll.
Hearing no objection, we're adjourned. Everyone have a blessed day.